Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto's mother and the Uzumaki clan abandon him. Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Summary: when the Yondaime sealed away the Kyuubi, a clan in Konoha thought that it would receive great honor due to his wish. Instead, the child of the clan became a stigma to their house, so they left him to fend for himself. Gone was the child's mother, cousins, clan elders and sister. Now, 8 years later, the child will stare into the blue eyes that mark his clan, but what fires burn behind blue eyes? Fires of love and forgiveness or fires of hate? 12 years ago, Arashi Koi, there must be another way. A young woman with pale blue hair cried from her hospital bed. Her striking blue eyes gazed at the blonde-haired man standing next to her. Those crystal eyes were filled with anguish, stabbing at the man who called himself her husband. Kagura-chan, we have no choice, Kazama Arashi, the Konoha Kiroi no Senko and Yondaime Hokage replied, the Kyuubi is simply too powerful to destroy. Even with Gamabunta aiding me, I could only hope to wound it for a short while. The Shiki Fuin is the only hope Konoha has. But why our son? She cried, holding the crying form of their newborn child to her chest, please, at least tell me why him. He carries the will of fire in him, Kagura. Both the blood of the Uzumaki clan and the Makoto clan rests in his veins. Arashi replied, he'll become a truly splendid ninja once he grows up, I know this already. As for why, I am the Hokage. How can I ask another family to sacrifice their own child if I am not willing to do the same? The tall blonde man gazed at his wife. Please, my love, understand this. Kazama Uzumaki Kagura bowed her head, her blue bangs touching the blonde tresses of her newborn son. It still amazed her how much like her husband her child already looked. He was certain to be a heartbreaker when he was grown. Still, his eyes were hers, the same crystal blue shared by the majority of the Uzumaki clan. The same shared by his 4-year-old sister, Kana, even. I've already left instructions with Jiraiya-sensei and Sarutobi-sensei, Arashi was saying, the people will know my will. Our son will be a hero, my love. But what about you? She whispered, broken. The Kage's greatest gift to their village is their life, he replied, at least Naruto will have you and the clan to watch and raise him. Naruto, you named him after your favorite ramen topping? She asked, incredulous at his choice. Actually, I was thinking the spiral version, the young Kage replied with his trademark grin. All too quickly it faded, replaced by a somber expression. It's time, Kagura-chan. Kagura nodded, placing a sad kiss on the newly christened Naruto's forehead. Be strong, my little one, she whispered. Reluctantly, she handed her child to her husband. Somehow, she knew things would never be the way her lover thought. She was right. 4 years later, this is becoming a nightmare. One of the elders shouted in the council chamber. That thing is ruining this clan. 5 times we've had to request Anbu protection for that Gaki in the last month, another replied. We're losing face while the Uchiha and Hyuga continue to gain strength in the civilian council. The villagers are starting to act like they are better than we are as well. The boy shows little talent in any of the clan techniques, another voice spoke, Takashi-kun has given up teaching him the Karuta Ryu styles. He may have an affinity for wind, but given his lack of aptitude with basic ninja techniques, it's unlikely he'll ever be able to adapt that into something useful. We should distance the clan from him, the second voice, with a new contract offered to us by the Fire Lord himself, the boy's presence would only be a hindrance. Even now, he disrupts the training of his sister, who is turning out to be a genuine prodigy for the clan. Panda-chan may not be in the direct line for clan succession, but she's certainly going to be a prize jewel for us in a few years. The trio of elders nodded, then turned to stare at the blue-haired woman kneeling before them. Once, this woman was the prize of the Uzumaki clan. A jounin of remarkable skill, second only to the Densetsu no Sannin, Sandaime Hokage, Haddock Tsukumo, and her own deceased husband Kazama Arashi, Uzumaki Kagura had in recent years turned cold and almost unfeeling. She rarely spoke to the council or to any other clan members unless it was absolutely necessary. Even her 2 children, the aforementioned Kana and the boy Naruto, received little attention from her. Kagura Dono, the head elder spoke, you know that the Fire Lord has requested our entire clan move to the capital city of Hinokakujin, Fire Pavilion. This move gives the clan a great opportunity to reclaim some of the honor your son has cost us, perhaps even gain greater renown as his highness's bodyguards. However, you needn't ask me what you are about to, Kasuke-sama, the cold woman replied, you wish me to leave my son here in the village while the rest of us travel to the city. Yes, that is correct, the old man replied, do you have a problem with it? Kagura felt a tug at her soul, even as she voiced her answer. She looked at the elders with eyes of cold blue ice. No, she replied, I will do what is best for the clan. Akasama. A small voice whispered, even its owner watched a taller woman escort his sister to a covered wagon. The small child stood next to a man in bright white robes with red trim, and a triangular pointed hat stood proudly on his head. The man was old, but several times he had visited the small boy with a friendly smile, so the child knew he could trust him. "Kagura-san, I beg you once again to stay this madness." The man with the robe spoke, his voice carrying a hint of anger evident even to the small blonde boy next to him. "This is your son, by the kami. To abandon him this way. It is the will of the clan, Sandame-sama," she replied. "I will do what is in the best interests of my clan." "Akasama." The small boy whimpered again, even as his big sister gave him a look of pity mixed with longing. Was I bad? Did I do something wrong?" Kagura ignored the boy's questions, though she again felt the strange pull at her heart she had felt a week prior, when the decision had been made. "We are the last ones here aside from Ibisu-kun," she replied. "He'll stand proxy for the Uzumaki clan on all civilian and shinobi matters. Kana and I must depart now." "Kagura." "Goodbye, Sandame-sama," the woman finished, before walking away. She climbed into the wagon with her daughter, and the driver lashed the horses, getting them moving. The blonde boy stared at the wagon as it moved away from his home. "Akasama, why? Why don't you want me? What did I do?" The wagon continued to move forward, even as he began to shout his pleas. "Akasama, I promise not to be bad anymore, please don't leave me alone." The hand on his shoulder vanished even as a form kneeled down and wrapped him up in a tight embrace, allowing the hot tears of the boy's misery to flow down the dark color shirt they wore. "Oji-chan, why did Akasama and Wani-sama leave me? Why am I so bad?" the boy whispered. "You are not bad, Naruto-kun," Saratobi Sudara replied, patting the boy's back in an effort to soothe his fractured heart. "You are truly special. Your Aka-san and Wani-san will see that someday." The boy continued to cry his soul out into the white robes of the old man. If I become a good ninja," the boy sobbed, will that make them love me?" Saratobi frowned over Naruto's head, even as he began to make plans for the boy. For him to think he needs to be a shinobi to get what should come freely from his clan, the professor thought, before he buried his darker feelings. "I think many will come to love you if you become a good shinobi, Naruto-kun." The old man stood, taking the boy's hand in his own. "Come with me, my boy. I'll treat you to some ramen. Your father loved this stuff." "I know what's ramen?" the boy asked, wiping his nose with the sleeve of his orange jacket. "You'll see, Naruto-kun. You'll see." 4 years later, when Yuigao first returned to the village, she expected the general apathy she experienced. She was a former member of the Uzumaki clan, the clan that had left Konoha to serve the daimyo. They had been gone for so long, it made the people think that the clan saw itself as too good for the village. While she had expected that, what she saw her cousin endure was far worse. Before the departure, she knew that the village hated Naruto. That hatred had been a major reason behind going to serve the daimyo. However, the cruelty she saw now was far worse. Naruto no longer had the protection of the Uzumaki clan, and hate that had built up for 4 years was finally allowed to express itself. Her loathing of her clan built increased with every sneer, every insult, every blow landed on his young body. She had expected to simply avoid him, but after witnessing his life, she was unable to stand by. She had practically begged the Hokage to let her join Anbu, and he reluctantly agreed, making her one of the youngest members to join Anbu. Since there was no war and Sandame had no desire to expose a young woman to the darker aspects of Anbu so soon, she was almost constantly assigned as one of Naruto's guardians. She couldn't have hoped for more. Unlike many of the other protectors, she wasn't content to watch from the shadows until a killing blow was about to hit. She made sure the villagers knew she was protecting him. Unsurprisingly, this led to Naruto being fairly attached to her, even calling her Anbu-chan. Unfortunately, the time of contentment passed when one of the newer recruits taunted her about her ousting from the Uzumaki clan in front of Naruto. Almost instantly the happy little boy vanished, replaced by one with distrusting eyes. While it stung to realize how much this child had been hurt by their family, Yuigao continued to protect him, seeing it as penance for her family's sins. Months passed. Yuigao had grown used to Naruto's silence around her and no longer let it worry her. Naruto no longer flinched when he saw her. She finally allowed herself to develop a social life, meeting a sweet but sickly man named Hade. He quickly swept her off her feet and they began dating. It was that action that stimulated the change. Naruto was amazingly skilled at hiding and sneaking. The villagers' hate towards him made it a necessity. So it was no surprise that Yuigao never noticed him silently following her when she was off duty. At her young age, she lacked the paranoia that marked most competent ninja. Over time, he grew to realize that she bore him no ill will and wanted to make amends for what had happened to him. Still, the hate he felt for his clan made it impossible for him to express this to her. Hate changed that. The sickly Jounin had never overtly tried to harm or insult Naruto. He barely had any interaction with the boy at all. Knowing this gave Naruto the courage to talk to him face to face. After watching him for several days, Naruto confronted him. The pale Jounin was surprised when Naruto approached him. Yuigao had spoke of him and their relation before, so he had some understanding, but was surprised that Naruto would come forward. From what Yuigao had said, the boy ignored her once he learned who she was. Curiosity filled Hate's mind and he invited the boy in. Despite the relaxed environment of Hate's home, he noticed Naruto was still twitchy. Judging from his experiences, it wasn't that surprising. He filled a glass with milk and gave it to the nervous boy. Don't worry kid. No one's going to attack you here. The statement seemed to settle him somewhat, though he still occasionally glanced around. Hate gave him a moment to drink before speaking up, so what brings you here? Yugao-san, the boy murmured. She mentioned you a few times, I guess I should have expected this, Hate replied, observing his reactions. Despite his age, Naruto managed to hide his shock fairly well. It would be an asset when he was older. What did she say? Despite Naruto's tone, you could sense his curiosity. Well, she says you're a sweet boy, except when you're playing pranks on people. You're also very determined to reach your goals. Hate watched Naruto's reactions, she also said that she was sorry for what happened to you. Naruto's head shot up, shock evident in his eyes. You know, for most people in the Uzumaki clan, you weren't that important. You were just another kid in the family. Yugao barely even knew you when they left. So? You shouldn't judge her too harshly. That's all. If she hated you like you seem to think, she wouldn't have been so gung-ho about protecting you. I'm not saying you should forgive her right away, but I think she deserves an opportunity to prove herself, don't you? Hate grabbed the empty glass to refill it, giving Naruto the chance to think about their conversation. When he returned, the chair was empty and the door ajar. He sighed, he might not have helped, but at least he tried. Naruto ran to the place he was most comfortable, the top of the Hokage monument. His conversation with Hate had made him reconsider his feeling towards the people who abandoned him. For once, his convictions were shaken. His hate for his family wavered and he questioned whether he was any better. For hours, he sat there, thinking about what to do. Days later, Yugao was on guard duty once again. As always, she remained silent and Naruto did the same. It wasn't until lunchtime that something changed. Do you want some? Naruto asked cautiously, as if he was afraid of her response. Yugao responded, surprised that he was talking to her again. I asked if you wanted some food, Anbu-chan. If you don't want any, no. I'd be glad to eat with you, Naruto-kun, she quickly replied, joining him for some ramen. It wasn't much, but it was a start. 4 years later, Uzumaki Naruto stared at the gray-haired genin kneeling on the ground before him, even as the older boy began relating his information about the different candidates taking the exam. He wasn't really paying attention. His mind was focused on passing this exam and taking the next step in his goal of becoming Hokage. There's also a special team from the Leaf in this exam as well, the boy, Kabuto said, a trio from the Fire Lord's personal bodyguards, the Uzumaki clan. Naruto's head whipped around so fast the Rookie 9 thought his head would pop off. What clan did you say? He asked, growling out his words as his hands clenched tight. The Uzumaki clan, he replied, looking into the azure eyes of the short genin. Yeah, I can see how you'd have an issue about that. Naruto, I thought you were an orphan. Sakura hissed, angry that the loudmouth member of her team would withhold something like this. His gaze snapped to her and she almost flinched at the anger burning within them. I am an orphan, he replied, his voice taking a hard edge that caused nearly everyone to flinch. I share the same surname with that clan. Nothing else. He noticed Hinata giving him a concerned look. I'd really rather not talk about it right now. His face broke into his usual cocksure grin. Come on, we got a test to pass. Dadabeo. Across the room, a trio of genin with the same azure eyes glanced over at the rookie group. So, the leader of the trio said, running a hand through his short black hair, that's Kanani-san's brother. He looks ridiculous with that orange jumpsuit, a girl with purple hair and a page boy cut muttered, no wonder the clan cast him out. I bet he's nothing compared to you, Taro-kun. Ninja rule number 5, never underestimate an opponent, the tallest of the trio said, his white hair bound in a simple samurai-style K. The effect was enhanced by the daisho he kept tucked into his obi. The outcast is here for a reason. Do not forget what we were told about, Ryaika-chan. Oh relics, Kenasuke, she replied, he's no threat. Didn't you hear that stupid proclamation he made earlier? I bet he doesn't even pass this first part. Kenasuke is right, Ryaika-chan, Taro replied. Don't underestimate him. Remember, he's supposedly been trained by your sister, remember? I have no sister, Ryaika replied. Yugao cut her ties with the Izuki and broke fellowship with the Uzumaki. She's dead to us. But she wasn't his Anbu level, Kenasuke replied, if she has been teaching him, he could be a real challenge, and don't forget what Kasuke-sama said. Uzumaki Naruto is a monster. I recommend avoiding him until we learn no more. Agreed, Taro replied, besides, even if we can't beat him, she can. Naruto sat next to Hinata, his mind going back to the day he'd been left behind. Has it really been 8 years since that day? He thought as the test papers began being handed out. I had all but forgotten about them. Has it really been that long since I started hating them? His hand tightened around his pencil in anger before he heard the voice of the shy girl next to him. "Ah no," Naruto-kun Hinata spoke up, getting his attention, "let's do our best." She smiled at him. "Yeah." He replied, smiling back at her. "The Uzumaki clan can wait," he thought. "Like they thought about me they're unimportant." The trio that comprised Team 7 knelt on the forest floor. The brief encounter with the AIM, Rain, Nin, had been a bit of an eye-opener to the group. The bound and gagged ninja that was lying unconscious several meters away gave testament to a fact that both Sasuke and Sakura had never really acknowledged before. Naruto was stronger than he let on. It was Sasuke who had initially exposed the enemy ninja after the blonde genin had gone to answer the call of nature. A brief exchange of Taijutsu and the Housenkan no Jutsu from the last Uchiha had ensued. It seemed pretty cut and dry after that to both of the remaining members of the rookie genin cell until the AIM nin had dissolved into water. Izubunshin. Sakura had cried out even as Sasuke was scanning the area with his Sharingan. When he found he couldn't see the AIM nin, he had leapt up believing an underground Doton Jutsu was coming. Instead, a hard boot to the head was his reward. Sakura had cried out as her crush came crashing down. The AIM nin glared at her and leapt towards the pink-dressed girl, a kunai in hand, ready to deliver a killing blow. Fueton. Kei's Jirai no Jutsu. Wind release. Wind torpedo technique, a familiar voice cried out, a blur of chakra-enhanced wind slamming into the attacking rain shinobi. Sakura had watched, somewhat awestruck, as the nin was sent careening into a tree, his outfit shredding in places and cuts appearing on the exposed areas of his skin. She was briefly thankful nothing embarrassing had been exposed, while her inner self was demanding a similar technique be used on Sasuke so she could finally answer some important questions. The Kunoichi turned to see her blonde teammate helping a slightly dazed Sasuke to his feet, even as the Uchiha heir gave him a look of mixed jealousy, awe, and curiosity. She made her way over to the now unconscious AIM nin, pulling out some of her wire and binding his arms and legs in a Jayaku Ibi tie. She pulled one of the looser pieces of cloth off his arm and made a makeshift gag to keep him quiet. Silently, she thanked the kami that those lessons that the Kunoichi were forced to take in their last year at the academy actually came of use. She had then proceeded to check over her friends before finally voicing the question she was sure Sasuke also had. "Naruto, what was that?" she asked. "I've never seen you." "It's a clan jutsu," he replied, his crystal blue eyes darkening. "I can't do Kaiten worth a damn, but a friend said I'm pretty good with Futon." "Is that one of the Uzumaki clan jutsus?" Sasuke asked. "We know you have a clan now." "I don't," Naruto replied, glaring at his rival. "I am not now, nor will I ever be a member of the Uzumaki clan." "You're declaring yourself Ronin," Sakura gasped, but Naruto, such an act could ruin any chance. "Okijiji already knows and agrees with me." Both of his fellow genin gasped before Sasuke glared at him. "So you just throw away your clan?" he asked, his voice going cold in anger. "I knew you were a dope." Naruto glared right back. "I didn't throw them away, team," he replied, "they threw me away 8 years ago." Sakura's eyes widened while Sasuke's narrowed. "Tell us the truth, Naruto," Sakura asked. "I can see hatred in your eyes, I've never seen that before." She glanced away. "It's scary." Naruto sighed. "Look, I don't want to talk about this in the middle of a test," he said. "After this round is over, I'll tell you about it. I promise." Both of his teammates nodded. Naruto and Sakura went to gather up the scattered kunai and shuriken, while Sasuke searched the AIM nin for anything of use. The Uchiha heir had to fight the urge to grin as he found the Kai scroll they needed among the AIM nin's possessions. And I called Naruto a dope," he thought as he placed the scroll in his pouch. He turned to his team. "He had what we needed, so let's go to the tower," he said. "We should beat most of the other teams, which will allow us to rest and prepare for the next part." He received nods from his teammates. "Right then, let's get moving." The trio made to stand up, only to find themselves seemingly pinned down under a murderous chakra. "Nani?" Sakura asked, her voice trembling. What is this chakra?" Naruto was the only one of the three who was able to make it to his feet. "Sasuke," he growled out, even as he strained himself against the killer intent permeating the air, "can you see who's doing this?" Sasuke managed to nod, motioning with his eyes to the far left. Naruto, with great force of will, managed to pull out a kunai and glared at the area Sasuke had indicated. "Whoever you are, come on out. I'm gonna kick your ass." Coo, a silky sounding voice carried through the clearing they were in. "Impressive, Naruto-kun, not many Chunin or even Jounin are capable of shrugging off my Kanashibari no Jutsu. You definitely inherited the stubbornness of your mother's clan." The pale Kusanin from the start of the exam walked into view, smirking at the obviously enraged blonde. Sasuke and Sakura were surprised at the level of anger Naruto emitted at the mention of the word mother. "I'm sure Kagura Dono would be most pleased at your obvious improvement." Naruto smirked. "Oh no, suddenly I'm respectable." He laughed, surprising his teammates, while making subtle motions to Sasuke to break the jutsu. "I guess I'll just have to put Dai in the ladies' hot springs again." Sakura glanced, then scowled at the blonde. "That was you?" She cried out, suddenly leaping to her feet as if the Kanashibari had never been cast. Sasuke found himself free as the sudden surge and killer intent from Sakura broke the jutsu holding him down. "Naruto no baka. Ino and I were orange for a week." Naruto's face fell. "But I thought you looked good like that," he complained, cringing at the expected blow. The strange enemy chuckled again, before calling out. "As amusing as this is," he spoke up, "perhaps it's time to fight." His hands flipped through a few quick seals, ending on Ryu, Dragon, a new jutsu for you to learn, Naruto-kun, and tell your clan. Orochimaru said hello. Gyuuten, Datapa. Wind release, great breakthrough. Naruto cried out as the gust of wind crashed into him with all the force of a jackhammer, the impact sending him flying through the clumps of leaves behind him. He vaguely heard Sakura and Sasuke crying out for him, but could do nothing as he flew through the forest. Meanwhile, Sasuke turned a hard glare at the strange ninja before them. "You'll pay for that," he growled, the tomos of his Sharingan spinning rapidly as if in response to his rage. While he would be the first to admit that Naruto was an annoyance more than a help at times, over the past few months, as his teammate Sasuke had come to respect the enigmatic blonde. The pair of them were more alike than either cared to admit, lonely, angry, and stubborn beyond belief, the pair may as well have been twins. Now his new brother was hurting, and that Sasuke could not let stand. His hands blurred faster than he had ever managed before, the Tora seal coming naturally to him as he breathed in the air needed for his technique. Kaiten. Housenkan no Jutsu. A series of fireballs flew from his mouth even as he began tossing shuriken from his thigh holster into the blasts. The strange ninja, who had called himself Orochimaru, grinned even as he ran through his own seal sequence. Suiton. Tepudama. He called out, launching a series of water blasts to cancel the fire out. His eyes widened in almost gleefulness as he noticed the hidden second attack of Sasuke's jutsu. Impressive. He called out, even as he dodged the rain of metal. Your jutsu usage is superb. You really are his brother, aren't you? He felt a small twinge of disappointment at the sudden look of rage that ghosted across the Uchiha heir's face. The boy's anger could be a problem, but also an advantage for my Juin. Sasuke rushed at the nin, his hands and feet flying in the taijutsu style his clan was famous for. His form was perfect. His speed was sublime. His power was incredible given his age. It was also utterly useless. A swift spin kick sent him flying, crashing down on a limb. Orochimaru smirked, then began to rush towards him, only to receive a surprisingly strong kick to his side from the Kunoichi he had all but forgotten was there. "You stay away." Sakura cried out, her hands flashing through a quick seal sequence, ending on Izumi. Orochimaru smirked as he recognized the signs of the low-level Genjutsu, Narakumi no Jutsu. He didn't even bother forming the Tora symbol, he just surged his chakra and broke the technique before it took hold. He spun around and caught the girl by her neck, lifting her from the ground. "I'm mildly amused, young flower," he chuckled, staring into her frightened eyes. "That was a superb thrust kick you gave me. I was reminded of my old comrade, Tsunadeheim, for a moment there." His grin changed then, and Sakura felt a chill reach deep into her bones. "Yes, you could be useful later as well." His head surged forward, and Sakura's world exploded into a haze of bright color, pain, and then darkness. Orochimaru chuckled, then cried out as he felt a foot lodge itself in his stomach. He glanced down, noting the fact that Sasuke had once again managed to stand, and his Sharingan was blazing in fury. Excellent, his Uchiha blood has begun to boil. The potential of this boy is staggering. The force of the kick hurled him across a gap between trees, and he grunted as his back was introduced to a particularly hard oak. He felt himself sliding briefly, before a sudden tightness across his chest forced him to come aware. He grimaced as he saw the wires trapping his arms against his sides, even as he noticed Sasuke plant a triple set of kunai into the limb he was standing on. The wires ran to the circlets on the blades, and Orochimaru couldn't help but be awed by what was happening. Even Itachi didn't master this until after he was 2 years older than Sasuke. He thought, the Sharingan windmill triple attack. Sasuke paid the sudden grin on the enemy ninja's face no mind as he ran through the seal sequence for his most powerful Kaiten jutsu. For Sakura, for Naruto, he thought. His hands paused on the final 2 seals, Ryu and Tora, gathering and focusing the chakra even as he inhaled a deep breath. "Kaiten. Ryuhen no Jutsu." He cried out, exhaling and blowing the giant surge of flame at the bound enemy. What he didn't expect was another voice to call out a jutsu as well. "Gyuuten. Atsugai." A surge of wind raced through the dragon's flames, fanning them and causing them to surge. The flames raced along the wires, rushing over and around the bound Orochimaru, who screamed in pain as the nearly white-hot fire surged around him. Sasuke turned to where the winds had come from, and he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Naruto standing there next to Sakura, his hands still clasped together in the Ryu seal, signifying his completion of a Futon technique. Once again, Sasuke had to wonder just how strong his teammate really was. He noticed something then which strangely enough chilled him even more deeply than Orochimaru had. Naruto's strange whisker marks were darker now and wider than before. His mouth was set in a horrible snarl and his teeth for a moment, Sasuke was sure they looked like fangs. It was his eyes, however, that were the most disturbing. Gone was the crystalline blue the blonde was famous for instead, those blue eyes that usually held some illusion of idiotic happiness and cluelessness, his eyes were red and slitted. It was almost like a cat or a fox. "You hurt my friends." The blonde growled at spot where Orochimaru had been. Sasuke turned and almost gasped at the sight. The man was practically unscathed, but his face it was almost melting off. "Indeed," the man replied, his right hand sliding over his hit I-8, revealing an Odo symbol instead of the Kusa one as before. "A test really, and I must admit, all three of you are impressive. I think the Uzumaki clan will be most intrigued to learn of your strength, Naruto-kun." His eyes, now revealed to be golden and slitted like a snake's, were practically dancing with sadistic mirth. "I see you can use its chakra combined with your clan skills, you will indeed make a formidable opponent one day. But what is this murderous chakra? I know the Nine Tails power, this is like it, but it's still human-like. What is this rage?" Sasuke gasped as the strange ninja suddenly appeared before Naruto, his tongue wrapped around the boy and holding him aloft. His left hand lifted Naruto's orange jacket up, revealing the boy's stomach and a strange black image that was upon it. "Yes, I see," Orochimaru mused as he studied the seal, "so this is the sealing array Arashi-kun used. I've never seen one so complex before really, such things are more Jiraiya's specialty than my own. In time, once you truly learn to control the power of the Kyuubi, you'll be stronger than me, but for now, you're merely in my way." His right hand began to glow as purple flames danced along his fingertips. "Fuin Jutsu. Gajo Fuin," he cried, thrusting his hand into Naruto's stomach, causing the boy to scream in pain. Sasuke watched in horrified fascination as Naruto's face reverted to the state it was normally before the blonde slipped into unconsciousness. "What did you do to him?" the dark-haired boy cried out. "A simple seal, my boy," the sadistic ninja chuckled before he vanished and then reappeared behind the stunned Uchiha Saiyan. Sasuke cried out as he felt a painful stab in his neck before a burning and gut-wrenching sensation began washing over him. "Now your seal, on the other hand, well, when you want to know more about it, come see me." He vanished, leaving Sasuke to his cries of pain. He screamed for a long time. Sometimes, she missed her country. Odo was a good place to become strong, but it lacked the wild mountains of Tsuchi no Kuni. Instead, she chose to defect and so got saddled with two idiots. She glanced at her teammates, fighting the urge to snort at Zaku's bluster and Dosu's sadism. Being one of the few kunoichi in Odo, she often found herself garnering the unwanted attentions of the men in from the village, though the pair before her could hardly be called men. She idly recalled the few days she had actually been in Iwa kunoichi and her home country. Kunoichi were rarely ever allowed out in the field unless it was on an espionage or a seduce and destroy mission. She would likely have been trained as a courtesan for the Earth Daimyo's court or for some high-end brothel for the visiting dignitaries. The thought made her want to puke. She knew her younger sister Himitsu was likely now serving as a whore in her place, but the brat had never been someone she cared about anyway. As far as Tsuchi-kin was concerned, watching out for herself was all that mattered. That was why she escaped with Taiya and Karen when they had fled. She would not sully herself just because the Tsuchikage was a misogynistic pig. When Orochimaru had found them and took them in, it was almost like a dream. Finally, they were being taught how to be true ninja and not porcelain dolls. Karen had demonstrated great skill at medicine and was rushed into the new medic nin program. Taiya, as the strongest, had earned a place with the Sound Force Genjutsu specialist. Kin had shown a real talent at hand-to-hand combat and marksmanship, making her the perfect frontline fighter. Still, why did I have to get Bandage Boy and Mr. Bloward as teammates? She bemoaned to herself. Zaku's air cannon arm certainly made up for the lack of skill he had in all other areas, like brains for instance, and Dosu's melody arm was useful for many different things, but his sadistic yet overly cautious nature held them all back. He took his time gauge any advantage an opponent might have, but would torment them for too long once he was sure he had their number. That guy is going to get himself killed soon. I just hope I'm there to see it. We have a visitor, Dosu spoke up suddenly. Zaku immediately was on guard, his chakra surging through his arms, even as Kin pulled a group of senbon from her thigh pouch. Cuckoo, I see your sense of hearing continues to grow stronger, Dosu-kun, a silky voice came from the darkness. Kin had to forcibly repress the shudder that wanted to crawl up her spine. Somehow, Orochimaru's voice always made her shiver, and it was never in a good way. Orochimaru-sama. Zaku exclaimed, dropping on one knee. Kin barely resisted snorting again. Brown noser, she thought. At ease, Zaku-kun, the snake Sannin chuckled, I have a job for the three of you, a mission different than what I told you that you'd be doing before. Kin frowned at that. You said we were to kill the Uchiha kid, Orochimaru-sama, she spoke up, what's changed? I thought you wanted him gone. Orochimaru smirked at the dark-haired girl. It should be interesting to see her reaction to this information, he thought. The presence of the Uzumaki clan in these exams has altered my plan somewhat, he replied. I need you three to gauge the abilities of the three Uzumaki from the fire capital. I have already dealt with Sasuke and his team, they are worthy of living. The other three, however, well, Kin-chan, I should think you'd enjoy tormenting them more than anyone here. Why would Kin want to hurt them, Orochimaru-sama? Dosu asked, glancing at his female teammate. Kin-chan is originally from Tsuchi no Kuni, the Sannin elaborated. I understand your father died in battle against the Yondaime Hokage, correct? Yes, Kin acknowledged warily. What does that have to do with these Uzumaki brats? The Yondaime was a member of the Uzumaki clan through marriage, he answered, drawing a sharp gasp from the girl. Hook, he thought. The Uzumaki are always proud to proclaim how he thrashed that legion of Iwanin in the last great battle. The girl's hands clenched tightly, and a drop of blood made its way down her palm from thanks to her nails piercing the skin. Line. I know for a fact that the clan heir, Uzumaki Taro, is the nephew of the Yondaime's widow Kagura, he continued. He's well trained, but lacks actual battle experience. Then I'll be happy to give him some, Kin finished, her heart warming at the thought of causing the family of her father's murderer pain. Sink her. Don't eliminate them, he instructed. I want to see them in the finals. I have my own grudge against the Uzumaki clan, and a plan is already set to truly make them hurt. You'll see what I mean in the next stage. His hands came together in the Hitsuji symbol before he vanished in a plume of purple flame. Remember, they can be hurt, but not eliminated. I want them to suffer. Kin glanced at her teammates. Let's find those punks, she all but growled out. For once, I'll be the sadistic one. I want their blood. Zaku and Dosu nodded, the former smirking, while the latter merely patted his gauntlet. The three exchanged a brief nod before leaping into the trees. They had a mission to complete. Sakura groaned as she came to, the light streaming through the leaves, almost fanning the flames of the headache she was experiencing. She clenched her eyes shut against the pain, but eventually had to force herself to open them. She slowly struggled to her knees, wincing as her skull protested against the act. Once she had gotten her bearings, she glanced around, searching out her teammates and praying that they were alright. Naruto was easy to spot, of course, his orange jumpsuit standing out against the dark green foliage of the trees and bushes around them. She crawled over to her loudmouth friend, reaching out a hand to check his pulse. She was relieved when her fingers detected a strong, steady beat at his neck. He's just out cold, she thought. That ninja must have hit him pretty hard. She slapped his face lightly, trying to stir him awake. After the fourth slap, the blonde-haired boy groaned, his blue eyes opening and gazing blearily into Sakura's green orbs. He coughed slightly before struggling to his knees as well. Ugh, he groaned. What happened? That freaky ninja. He must have knocked you out, Naruto, the pink-haired girl explained. I just came to myself. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a small bottle of aspirins, dropping 2 into Naruto's outstretched hand before taking a couple herself. What happened? The last thing I remember was that scary ninja giving me a headbutt before everything went blank. She barely had time to blink before Naruto was fussing about her head, checking for injury. You got a little blood here, but not much, Naruto muttered. At least he didn't mess up your pretty face. He gave her his usual cocksure grin, and despite her confessed feelings about her orange-clad teammate, she felt a small blush grace her cheeks. Naruto smiled again at that, then his face turned serious as he started scanning the area. His eyes widened when they landed upon the crumpled heap nearby. Sasuke. He all but shouted, leaping to his feet and running over to him, Sakura close on his heels. Together, the pair checked over the Uchiha heir, noting that aside from the bruising and cuts gained during the battle with Orochimaru, Sasuke seemed to be perfectly fine. When Sakura put her hand on his forehead to check his temperature, however, she was forced to cry out. He's burning up. She muttered, he's got to have a temperature of at least 105 degrees. Naruto stared at her blankly. Is that high? He asked. Sakura gaped at him, causing him to blush in embarrassment. I don't think I've ever had a fever before. None of the doctors at the hospital ever said I did the times I was there. Sakura frowned. Even she knew that temperature checks were standard procedure at hospital. How could Naruto have never known if he'd ever had one? She quickly filed that away for later. Whatever, she replied. Listen, we need to find some shelter and water to treat our wounds. I'll take Sasuke down to the ground while you go get some water. We'll meet back at this spot in an hour. Should I try to get some food too? He asked. I think we could both use something to give us some energy, and Sasuke could probably do the same once he wakes up. If he wakes up, Sakura's inner voice muttered, though she paid it no mind. It was not the time to argue with herself. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, she said. Don't take too long though. If you can't find anything like fish or whatnot, we'll just have to make do with the ration bars I brought. Ah. Naruto grimaced, sticking his tongue out. I hate those things. We all do, Naruto, she replied, reaching down and lifting the Uchiha heir up by his shoulder. That's when she saw something strange. Naruto, take a look at this. The blonde genin moved over, glancing at the area Sakura was staring at. At the junction where Sasuke's neck met his shoulder, a strange black mark was set in his skin. Weird, Naruto muttered, it's like the Tomo in Kakashi-sensei and Sasuke's Sharingan. He didn't have this before the fight, Sakura muttered, that guy he must have done this to him. Well, we can't deal with it now, Naruto replied, wincing slightly as he rubbed his stomach, let's do what we agreed on, you take care of Sasuke, and I'll go get some food and water. If he doesn't wake up by midday tomorrow, we'll take him to the tower as he is. There are bound to be medics there. Sakura was surprised at Naruto's insightfulness, but nodded anyway. It was yet another mystery about the blonde boy she had come to call her friend for her to unravel. The blonde nodded back, then leapt down from the branch and began making his way through the forest. Sakura carried Sasuke down, finding a hollow section of roots to duck under. After she laid him down, she proceeded to layer the area with traps, as well as a subtle genjutsu. It would cause people to not pay attention to the spot unless she allowed it. Once again she gave a silent thank you to that strange Anbu Kunoichi that seemed to follow Naruto sometimes. She wondered again why the lady did that, but shrugged it off as she had more important things to take care of. Yuigao leapt through the forest with two of her Anbu partners. She had immediately volunteered to enter the forest once she heard that Anko had gone in after her rogue sensei, the snake Sanin Orochimaru. While she had never been close to the former disciple of the traitor, Yuigao respected Anko's desire to see justice done to the monster. One of the bastard's earlier experiments had cost the life of her uncle, and though she was now outcast from the Uzumaki clan and the Izuki branch of it, that insult to the family had to be avenged. I hope we find her before she finds him though, the purple-haired Anbu thought as she leapt from tree to tree, Anko will likely try to kill him, even if it costs her both their lives, and then I won't get my shot. She noticed something a few trees to the left, and she signaled her teammates to follow as she veered in that direction. When they arrived, they were greeted by a dark sight. Senijashu. The Takubetsu Joun in Mitarashi Anko cried out, four pythons shooting out from her sleeves, and grabbing hold of a man who appeared to be halfway sunk into the trunk of the tree. With a roar worthy of the giant tigers that lived in the forest of death, the mesh-clad girl swung her arms and ripped the man from the tree, hurling him against the trunk of another tree. This is Anbu Nico to Anbu base, she whispered into her communicator, Orochimaru confirmed in training area 44. Joun and Mitarashi currently engaging. Moving to assist. She leapt down to the tree where the other girl was rushing up to the trapped Sanin. Anko slammed her left hand against his right, before swinging her right arm around and impaling both of their hands with a kunai, pinning them against a tree. My, Orochimaru grinned despite the pain, you really have improved my little cobra. Oh, you don't know the half of it, sensei, the girl replied, stressing the sarcasm in the word sensei. I've had almost 10 years to prepare for this. She reached down and grabbed his left hand, her fingers manipulating his into a modified hibi seal. Now, if you don't mind me using your left hand here, Ninpu. Sahasosai no Jutsu. Ninja art, twin snake self-sacrifice technique. Yuigao had been silent to this point, but even she knew what this kenjutsu could do. Anko-senpai. She called out, landing on the branch with the two ninja. Stay out of this. The serpent Kunoichi growled as she surged her chakra for the jutsu, we're going to die together, sensei. Ah, but I don't think that's going to happen, Anko-chan, he replied, after all this jutsu only works if there's two of us. Anko's eyes widened, and Yuigao whipped around, even as the Orochimaru Anko held dissolved into a pile of mud. The pair of Kunoichi were joined by the other two Anbu members, even as the real snake Sanin appeared a few branches above them. Damn you, Anko growled, ripping the kunai that held her hand against the tree free and hurling it at the pale ninja. He smirked as he caught it with two fingers before raising his hand up into a half-Itsuji seal. Anko gasped, then fell to her knees as a surge of pain erupted from her shoulder. Yuigao and her fellow Anbu moved around her protectively, even as Orochimaru laughed at his former pupil's plight. Your curse mark still responds to me, my little cobra, he laughed, still, it's not you I'm interested in. Are you here to assassinate Hokage-sama then? Yuigao asked, her hand on the ninjato strapped to her back, what is your purpose here? Orochimaru laughed. I merely have an interest in a few of the competitors, he replied, some of my own subordinates are competing as well. He grinned. Indeed, there are one or two I'm truly fascinated with. One was so impressive I even gave him my mark. That's a foolish gift, Anko groaned, he'll die most likely. True, there is only a 1 in 10 chance he'll live, Orochimaru nodded, still, his breeding is superb. His body is also exquisite. If he lives he'll be the perfect vessel to succeed me. He stared down at the assembled nins. I know you plan on stopping this exam. I warn you, if you do, then Konoha will be destroyed. His body faded from view as his voice echoed around them. The exam must continue. There is still much that must happen. Yuigao frowned behind her mask before turning to the stricken Anko. Senpai, can you stand? She asked. At the girl's nod, she turned to her teammates. Head back to headquarters and make the report. I'll escort Anko-sama to the tower. The other two Anbu nodded before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Anko looked at the purple-haired Anbu. I was stupid, Yuga-san, she muttered, I should have known he'd use Kawarimi. He isn't one of the Sannin for nothing, Anko-senpai, the armor-clad girl replied, come on, let's get to the tower and get you looked at. The pair of kunoichi vanished in puffs of smoke. Naruto stopped when he came to a stream near a clearing, smiling as he saw several fish in a nearby alcove of rock. A quick and judicious use of cage bunchin resulted in 3 nicely sized river trout for his team. He pulled out a scroll and sealed the fish away for easy transport. I gotta remember to thank Hei Niacin for teaching me this, he thought. He proceeded to fill both his and Sakura's canteens with water and once finished turned to leave, only to find his path blocked by 3 people he did not want to deal with. Hello, cousin, Uzumaki Taro smirked, fancy meeting you here. Naruto glared at his cousin but chose to not reply. Instead, he gazed over at the kunoichi of the group. You must be Ryaika, he said, causing the purple-haired girl to scowl. Yuga-nichan sends her regards. I know she misses you. HMMPH, I couldn't care less what that traitor feels, the belligerent girl replied. She chose to break with the Izuki and Uzumaki, so she's persona non grata with me. Naruto simply shook his head. And you people wonder why Konoha doesn't like the clan anymore, he muttered, to think I share the name, sometimes it's a shame almost too great to bear. The boy in samurai garb frowned at him. You will speak of the clan with respect, he ordered. His eyes widened angrily as Naruto laughed. Oh please, he snorted, the day I treat you with respect is the day I decide to quit being a ninja, and that is never going to happen. Naruto turned to the black-haired boy who appeared to be the leader. Given that you know my name, it's only fair that I know yours now. Manners and all that, you know. He had to resist scowling when he saw the boy's blue eyes gleam arrogantly. Is he really that stupid he's actually going to introduce himself? The boy laughed. Sure, why not? He replied, I'm Uzumaki Taro, heir of the Uzumaki clan. He pointed at Ryaika. You already know Yuzuki Ryaika, from the Yuzuki family branch and a formidable user of both Taijutsu and Ninjutsu. Finally he pointed to the third member of the group. This is my cousin Uzumaki Kennosuke, the best swordsman of our generation. We are 3 total and complete idiots, Naruto interrupted, pulling out a kunai and hurling it at the bushes to the left. 3 forms leapt from said bushes, landing nearby. Naruto belatedly noticed that they were the team from Odo, and he frowned as he recalled Orochimaru also wearing an Odo Hitai-8. He turned his glare back to the 3 members of his estranged clan, who were gaping at him. You cannot be telling me you didn't notice them, he growled, are you really that green? Ryaika scowled. We don't need an outcast like you criticizing us, team. She shouted at him. Naruto rolled his eyes, pulling out another kunai and focusing his chakra. He winced as he felt a slight burn around his stomach. Damn, what did that snake freak do to me? He thought. HMMPH, and here I thought this was going to be a challenge, Dosu muttered, they seem to be fighting amongst themselves. That's the loudmouth from before, Zaku noted, is he a part of that clan? If he is, he doesn't act like it, Kin growled, the Uzumaki clan is notorious for both their skill and their arrogance. This kid seems to be more concerned with the situation than his pride. I wonder who he is. Naruto noted this byplay, but filed it away for later. He kept on the black-haired boy. A ninja never reveals more than is needed, he continued, as if lecturing the clan heir. Taro scowled, but was unable to interrupt as Naruto plowed on. All you should have told me was your names. Instead, you revealed your importance to the Uzumaki, Ryaika-san's skills, and Kennosuke-san's specialty. Now anyone who might have been spying on us, i.e. those 3 Odon in there, know what to expect and will be able to counter it. The 3 members of the Uzumaki clan almost gaped at that. Despite all that they had been taught by the council about this boy, his logic was undeniable. Naruto frowned at them, then turned to the 3 enemy ninja on his left. I have a teammate who needs me, he said, I don't have time to fight you, but I do have a question. Gin frowned, but stepped forward. You answer mine, and I'll answer yours, she replied, they called you an outcast, are you a member of the Uzumaki? No, he replied, they cast me out when I was 4 years old. They abandoned me for something that was never my fault. He stared at her, noticing the position her legs were in. You're from Iwa, aren't you? Gin gaped, but smirked. I was born in Tsuchi no Kuni, but I am no Iwa nin, she replied, I'm Odo, and that's all there is to it. Naruto shrugged. Fair enough, he replied, now for my question, what did Orochimaru do to my friend? If there was one thing Naruto truly prided himself on, it was his ability to stun people. While it was true his pranks were primarily meant to garner attention for himself, even if that attention was scoldings from Iruka-sensei and Yuga-senpai and stern looks from Hokage, they also served the secondary purpose of giving him a reason to laugh at people who normally laughed at him. The 6 genin around him were all gaping at him stupidly would normally be very laugh-worthy, but Sasuke and Sakura-chan needed him. I know you know him, he continued, my teammate told me he had an Odo Hitai-8 is he your sensei? Orochimaru-sama is our leader, the Otakage, the hunched-over mummy spoke. You said he did something to your friend who is your friend, and what did he do? I won't tell you his name, but that bastard put some sort of mark on his neck, the blonde replied. What did he do? Bajuin, Kin muttered, but why? Taiya barely survived getting hers, and she's older than the rest of these brats. Juin a curse. The Uzumaki called Taro wondered, what would one of the Sannin want with the outcast's teammate? Well, at least now I know, Naruto replied, I don't have a problem with you three yet. If I come across that Orochimaru again however well, I'm sure you can deliver a message to him. The Odo Nins nodded. Tell him he's awakened the depths of the maelstrom. The three Uzumakis gasped at his words. What do you think you're doing, you fool? Taro shouted, Orochimaru is one of the Sannin, the three shinobi of legend. You just declared blood feud against someone of the Yondame's level. I know who the bastard is, Bakaru. Naruto shouted back, you Gaonichan told me all about him and don't ever compare him to the Yondame. If you do I swear I'll shove my foot so far up your ass you'll gag on my sandal. Taro frowned. Know your place, outcast. He snarled, you've done something that could have repercussions for the entire clan. Last I checked, I'm not a member of the clan, Naruto replied, I was cast out, so the clan has nothing to do with my decisions. Right now, that bastard has hurt someone I've come to call a friend. I have very few, and I protect those few with everything I've got. When you can say the same, then I'll consider what the clan wants before I run my mouth. He punctuated this by pulling his eyelid down and sticking his tongue out at the dark-haired boy. Enough of this, Ryaika shouted, her hands flying through a seal sequence, even as she leapt to stand on the flowing waters of the river. She ended with a Tori seal, even as the waters began surging around her. Suiton. Suryuidan no Jutsu. Water release. Water dragon blast, she cried out even as a large serpentine shape shot up out of the water, circling around her before launching towards the Odo Nins. Naruto leapt away into the trees. I wish I could stay and watch this, but my team needs me now. He thought to himself, even as the shouts and cries of battle began to make themselves known. Still, I got a feeling this isn't going to turn out so well for my cousins. Zaku smirked as the water dragon rushed towards them, barely noticing that the orange-clad loudmouth had left. Oh please, he said, so outdated. Zankuha. Slicing airwave, his right arm snapped up and a rush of pressurized air mixed with chakra lanced forward, cleaving Ryaika's attack in two. The purple-haired girl gaped in amazement and as such barely noticed the girl called Kin, launching a volley of senbon needles at her. The white-clad Kenasuke was the one who saved her, pulling his katana from its sheath and disrupting the attack with a sudden pressure change. Nice move, the bandage-clad Dosu muttered, you've got some speed with that sword, just what do you call that move? It is the most basic technique of Iajutsu, the taller boy replied, simple Badajutsu, I didn't even have to use my chakra for it. Just a plain old sword skill. Oh, I hardly believe that, Dosu replied, I know a good way to test it though. He shifted his cloak to reveal the silver gauntlet that adorned his right arm. My melody arm has many different abilities. It all depends on how I mold my chakra. He rushed toward the boy, who swung his blade around to block the punch. Fist met the flat of blade as a high-pitched ring echoed throughout the clearing. Kenasuke grimaced as he felt his blade vibrate so hard he almost dropped it. I see, he groaned out, your weapon it uses sound waves to disrupt its target stability. True, Dosu replied, I can burst eardrums, shatter stone, break bones, and even liquefy my opponent's internal organs. So why did you not do so here? Because I had some suspicions about this blade of yours, the bandaged boy replied, you use a chakra Kohen no Tsurugi. Kenasuke frowned, leaping away from the Odo Nin, sheathing his sword as he went. I have to admit, I wasn't expecting a sword that rare to belong to a genin, or that you could use it so well. You must be very skilled to utilize the sword's chakra storage abilities. Not surprising that he didn't reveal it, Kin shouted as she ducked a thrust kick sent her way by Ryaika. The Uzumaki clan is obscenely wealthy, so of course he'd have a rare weapon like that if he had any real skill. We may be wealthy, Taro spoke up, his hands flying through a seal sequence, finishing with a Ryu symbol, but we're also very skilled. Fuiton, Furyu no Jutsu. Wind release. Wind dragon technique. Zaku's eyes widened as the winds picked up, swirling around the dark-haired boy and taking the shape of a dragon. That's a new one on me, he muttered, but it's no match for my Zankakuha. Super slicing airwave. The two blasts of chakra-enhanced air slammed into each other, ripping the ground to shreds. Long gouges appeared as dirt, rocks, and plants were hurled left and right, and each genin was forced to leap about to avoid being struck by debris. Kin and Ryaika leapt away from each other, both breathing heavily and sporting cuts and scratches. Kin's face bore a look that suggested that she was insulted, while Ryaika's was more a look of frustration. Your boyfriend says you're a taijutsu genius, Kin mocked, so where are those vaunted chakra kicks and open skills that I heard so much about when I lived in Tsuchi no Kuni? You are holding back, right? Ryaika frowned. Those styles of taijutsu are reserved for the main branch of the family I'm in Yuzuki, not in Uzumaki. HMMPH, no wonder I feel insulted, Kin replied, honestly, I think that your outcast cousin would have been more fun to fight. She turned to look at her teammates. I think we've learned enough for Orochimaru-sama, don't you guys? Yeah, we learned they're a bunch of wimps, Zaku replied. Heh, I think Orochimaru-sama was worried for nothing, Dosu replied. He pulled a smoke bomb from his pouch. Make no mistake, Uzumaki Taro-san, he called over to the dark-haired boy, when next we meet it will be far more unpleasant for you. With a quick toss, the smoke billowed out in front of the Uzumaki clan, and the three Odonin vanished from sight. Cowards. Ryaika shouted, come back and face us. Ryaika-san, that is enough, Kenosuke muttered, they are gone. Ryaika growled, while Taro smirked. They seriously underestimated us though, which means Orochimaru will underestimate the clan as well, he replied, so the plan continues. Ryaika cheered her cousin's statement, while Kenosuke cleaned his blade before resheathing it. I don't know about this, he thought to himself as the trio took to the trees once more. Something doesn't feel right, was it because of how the outcast acted? Kenosuke didn't like this feeling of foreboding crawling up his spine. He liked even less that it was his inferior outcast cousin who was causing it. There was much about the 44th training ground that Sarutobi Sudara didn't like. He wasn't happy that the giant tigers had never been successfully tamed so as to prevent the maulings of many Chunin hopefuls in past exams. He never cared for the flying leeches or the giant centipedes, especially that one year when a particularly promising Kunoichi was found drained dry after having been abandoned by her teammates, said young men now spent their days breaking rocks in the prison quarry for their cowardice. What he disliked most, however, was how Anko had made the tower in the center of the facility her home, despite having an assigned apartment in the village. It shamed him to think that she was more comfortable isolating herself from the villagers so that she couldn't hear their words of scorn. Snake whore. Traitor's pet. Orochimaru's disciple. Sarutobi was well aware of the stories that circulated around the village following Orochimaru's defection and Anko's subsequent questioning by Ibiki and the Anbu. He knew that some ninjas now made up horror stories, or worse, about how Anko served his traitorous pupil. It was not unheard of for parents to frighten their children into obedience these days with the phrase, if you don't behave, you could end up like that Mitarashi girl and get an evil sensei. Given Orochimaru's reputation, it could be an effective tool to enforce obedience, but not when it denigrated Anko like that. He stared at the dark-haired young woman as she sat on the couch before him, a medic nin checking her over to make sure there were no lasting side effects from Orochimaru's activation of her Juin. Behind her, Yuzuki Yuigao and her fiancé Gekko Hade, the third stage proctor, gave the young special jounin looks of concern. On another side of the room, Kitetsu and Izumo observed the monitors, watching the progress of several teams as they made their way through the forest or in the cases of Gen and Cell 8 and the Suna team milled about the tower. So, he said that he would destroy the village if we stop this exam, the aged leader muttered, just what is my Baka Denshi planning? He said he gave the mark to a participant in the exam, Anko replied, I'm certain he meant the Uchiha boy. He was always obsessed with that damn Sharingan of theirs. The Uzumaki clan never cared for the Uchiha's Dijutsu, Yuigao muttered, most of the clan jutsus are so chakra intensive, even if the Uchiha did copy them, they could never perform them without passing out from chakra exhaustion. If there was any Dijutsu that the clan despised, it was the Byakugan and the Jyuukin fighting style the Hyuga clan created for it. The gentle art that does the same damage as the Igi and Hyugi styles in the Uzumaki Ryu, Sarutobi acknowledged, Yuigao-san, you told me once about the Hyuga era Hinata stalking Naruto-kun, correct? Yuigao frowned. Despite being at odds with her clan, there were certain things that had been ingrained in her since childhood that she simply could not get past. One of them was an almost instinctual dislike of the Hyuga clan. She didn't truly know Hinata, but the fact that the girl was main house was enough to set the Anbu on edge. The girl's obvious infatuation with her cousin didn't help matters. True, but that's neither here nor there, Hokage-sama, the purple-haired girl replied, I'm more worried about Naruto's team, the Uchiha is on it. Orochimaru probably knows about Naruto-kun's burden. What if he came here for that? Doubtful, Anko replied, Orochimaru hates the Bijuu, he always told me that power like that should never belong to wild and uncontrollable beasts. He'd sooner try to directly assassinate you, Hokage-sama, than mess with the Yondame's seal. He'd never want to deal with the Kyuubi even with his strength, he'd barely want to deal with the Ichibi, and even less the Nibi. Given his fear of death and the Nibi's powers, it's certainly understandable, Kitetsu spoke up, still, he is one of the Densetsu no Sannin, that means he's at least as dangerous as one of the Bijuu. Regardless, we can't cancel the exam, Sarutobi muttered, inform me the instant Naruto's team arrives, and have them all brought to me. If Sasuke is marked, we'll place a containment seal on him immediately until I can contact Jiraiya or Tsunade. The two of them should be able to counteract anything Orochimaru might have done. Yuigao's eyes widened at the mention of the other two members of the Sannin. Hokage-sama, she spoke up, does Tsunade-sama know about? She's unaware of Naruto's connection to Arashi, the old man replied, but I will tell her once she arrives. I've sent Yamato to retrieve her. Heiei coughed as he mentioned something, and cough cough, Jiraiya-sama. He's where he always is, Sarutobi sighed. Pervert, Anko muttered, even as she grinned. At one of the more liberal bathhouses in the village, a certain white-haired old man sneezed. Unfortunately, this alerted the young lesbian couple, a short-haired blonde with a slim athletic build and a qua-dressed beauty who gave new meaning to the phrase va-va voom, since she had great va-vas and a dynamite voom, to his presence. The pair of Kunoichi proceeded to pummel him severally before utilizing a tag team combo of Doten and Suiton Jutsu to send him flying. Why can't we get any privacy, Haruka-chan? The qua-dressed girl asked. Honestly, it's like the whole world's against us, Michiru-chan, the blonde replied. Sasuke groaned as he came to. A pleasant smell assaulted his nostrils and an even more pleasant coolness covered his aching head. He opened his eyes to see Sakura and Naruto hovering about him. Sakura Naruto, he groaned, what happened to me? We don't know much, Sakura replied, replacing the cold compress. All we know is that guy, Orochimaru, put some kind of curse seal on your neck. It really took you out. Yeah, you've been out for almost a full day, Naruto elaborated. Sakura took care of you while I scouted the area and caught us some fish. We're about 3 clicks from the tower and it's still only the 3rd day. We can still pass if you're up to it. I feel worse than after that mission in Nami, but I won't let this thing beat me, the Uchiha heir growled. Besides, you still have to tell us about this clan of yours. Naruto frowned. Yeah, about that, he muttered, I had a little run-in with them while you were out. Sakura snapped her gaze towards the blonde. What happened? She asked. They demonstrated how stupid they are, Naruto replied, I'll tell you about it later. Right now we should eat, then get to the tower so they can look at that mark the Hibi team put on Sasuke. Sakura's eyes twitched at Naruto's casual response. Hibi team? She asked. Sasuke smirked at his blonde friend. He's an enemy and a jerk who uses snakes, so Hibi team, Naruto explained, what about it? Sakura just shook her head. Nothing, she replied, nothing at all. Sasuke was tempted to laugh out loud even if it was against his usual nature as he sat up, wincing as a sharp stabbing pain made itself known around his left shoulder. Kami-sama, he breathed, his right hand grabbing the area and rubbing it. God, what is this thing? He noticed the concerned looks his teammates were giving him. It's painful, but not debilitating, he frowned as he thought of something. If this is some kind of seal, I wonder what it might have done to my chakra. Sakura frowned. Fuinjutsu isn't really taught much at the academy, she muttered, nobody really wants to put the effort into learning it, it's one of the most difficult arts to learn. I don't know much other than the basic weapon and supply sealing techniques that they teach all genin. Naruto frowned. Fuinjutsu, that was a bitter subject with him. While he didn't know much about his particular seal, Jiji had been surprisingly tight-lipped about it. He did know that certain seals could be used to both augment certain things or restrain and cancel out others. There's only one way to know, he spoke up, surprising the other two. Try and mold some chakra. If that mark did anything to you, we should know before we head to the tower. But Sakura started to protest. For all we know, it's some kind of explosive seal or something, Naruto cut her off. If we wait to find out at the tower and it is, then Sasuke could indirectly take out not only us but the rest of the testers and even our senseis. Sakura's eyes widened as she caught on to what her teammate was saying. It's a risk, but it's one we have to take. Sasuke snorted. The 10th question? He asked. Both Naruto and Sakura had to chuckle at the irony of the situation. He was right after all. Both of you back away. If it looks like something's wrong, then I want you to get out of here. Head for the tower and get Kakashi-sensei, the proctors, anyone. He stood up, his hands coming together in the Taurus seal. I'll try activating my Sharingan. It's not nearly as draining to me as it is to Kakashi. How will we know if it worked? Sakura asked. If I haven't blown up after 10 seconds, come check my eyes, he replied. Now, move. The other two nodded, leaping away into the other side of the clearing. Sasuke took a few deep breaths, trying to cleanse his mind as he began focusing his energy into his hara. Slowly, far more so than was usual for him, he began to feel the buildup of his chakra. He could already tell his control was out of whack, but it wasn't completely hampered. He began feeding his chakra to his eyes, closing the lids as the buildup reached its peak. Almost there, almost now, he thought. Sharingan. He cried out, his eyes opening into the red wheels with 2 black tomo around each pupil. For a moment, all was as it normally was. Then, hell broke loose. Kabuto watched the group from above, his teammates beside him, as the purple aura began surrounding the Uchiha heir. So, Sasuke-kun survived the application of the Ten no Juin, the silver-haired medic Nin noted, and his chakra. I doubt even Orochimaru-sama was capable of such an output at that age. Like it matters, one of his masked compatriots replied, he's just going to wind up a shell in the end anyway, he's little better than Sound 5. And yet I seem to recall Jirabu-kun, the weakest of that group, beating you to a pulp the last time you met," Kabuto replied. "Do remember your place, Miss Yumi-kun." "I gotta agree with Kabuto," the second masked figure spoke. "I'm not even sure my chakra Kyu and no jutsu, chakra absorption technique, could drain that much. The kid's a monster." "I always thought you were wuss Yoroi," Miss Yumi replied. "Quite." Kabuto muttered, stopping the argument before it began. "It looks like Naruto-kun is up to something." Naruto walked forward, even as his instincts practically screamed at him to run. He gazed at the figure before him with obvious concern and more than a little trepidation. Sasuke's body was covered in black flame-like markings. The tomo of his Sharingan were spinning widely and his breath was coming out in deep gasping heaves. His chakra was strong, so strong that it was visible, wreathed around him like purple flames. "Sasuke-kun," came the weakened voice of Sakura. "What? This power?" the Uchiha muttered. It feels good." The last came out as a whisper, but the intensity of it made it seem almost like a cry of triumph. "Sasuke, that's enough," Naruto muttered, his left hand clenching into a fist. "Something's wrong, look at yourself." The Uchiha smirked. "What's wrong, dope?" he asked. "This market's made me stronger, are you jealous?" His words started out as a whisper, but ended in a vicious snarl. The orange-clad genin frowned. "Listen to yourself," he replied. "Think. Why are you acting like this?" His hands clenched tighter and he felt his body tensing up as if preparing to strike the first blow. "Sasuke-kun." Both genin blinked as a form appeared behind the manic Uchiha, wrapping its arms around him. It took only a moment for the two to realize it was Sakura. "Please stop," she whispered, "you're scaring us." Sasuke seemed to frown and Naruto tensed his body again. Then, to his surprise, the red eyes darkened into the familiar black of his rival and the marks began to recede back into the original seal. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Miss Yumi muttered. "On the contrary, it was most enlightening," Kabuto replied. "Most who survive the seal application process go berserk. The first time it's activated, Sasuke-kun was able to control it and even force it down. That proves a stronger will than Orochimaru-sama anticipated." Having a pretty girl press her into his back was probably what did it," Miss Yumi countered. "She ain't exactly well developed, but she does have some stuff upstairs. I wonder how she'd like my special techniques." "We're not here for you to grope schoolgirls," Yoroi replied. "Besides, I thought that the blonde from the rookie group was better." Kabuto sighed as he listened to the two perverts discuss their lolicon fetish regarding the two kunoichi. "It seems, Orochimaru-sama, that you might have underestimated your chosen vessel," he thought as he and his team leapt away. "Still, I'm more concerned with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Something about him is different." He suddenly smirked to himself. "Perhaps I can save you some trouble with him. I'm sure Sasori-sama and Zetsu-sama would be most interested in learning about this boy." He kept his laughter to himself as they approached the tower. Sasuke blinked as his mind cleared and he felt the pressure of Sakura on his back. "Sakura," he muttered, "I'm alright now." Sakura continued to hold him even as he turned to look at Naruto. The blonde seemed to be pained by his crush's actions, but nevertheless, he smiled. "You started to worry me there, team," he spoke up. "That mark is definitely bad news." Sasuke could feel the lingering effects of the mark throughout his body, and in truth, it felt good. "It's addictive," the Uchiha Saiyan replied. "I can feel it, it's like my chakra was boosted more than anyone else's I've ever felt." Sakura frowned, then moved around to face Sasuke. "You shouldn't use it," she said. "It's evil, whatever that chakra was. It wasn't you, Sasuke-kun. You could lose yourself if you use it again." "That won't happen," Naruto replied. "He won't use it again and I know Jiji or Kakashi-sensei can do something about it." His trademark cocksure grin appeared and for once, it didn't seem to be fake. "Come on. Let's get to that tower and pass this exam. If we hurry, we might even be able to get ramen." "Naruto, is ramen all you ever eat?" Sakura asked, frowning at her hyperactive teammate. "No, I also like eggs," he replied, "especially when they're boiled and added to my ramen." "I give up," the pink-haired kunoichi replied. Sasuke smirked, then turned to Naruto. "You still have the scrolls, right?" he asked. Naruto nodded, patting his hip pouch. "Okay, let's go. The sooner we get there, the sooner we can get our injuries checked out. I'd like to go into the next test fresh." "You got that right," the blonde replied. Sakura nodded and the trio leapt into the trees, headed for the tower and their next exam. Sakura was very apprehensive as the group approached to the tower. When she had first become a genin, it was in the hopes that she could eventually prove to Sasuke that she was worthy of his respect and possibly love somewhere down the line. She knew that these notions were childish and somewhat naive, but she was still a child herself. The journey to Nami no Kuni was an eye-opener for her. She had seen death and suffering, things she had read about but never fully understood. Yes, she knew how painful teasing was, but it was nothing compared to genuine hardship. She had helped to dig Zabuza's and Haku's graves after the battle, it being the first time she had ever been so close to dead bodies. She had felt her heart shatter twice on that bridge, first when she thought that Sasuke had died, and again when it turned out that he was actually alive. Granted, this was a good shattering, but it was still jarring to her. When Kakashi-sensei had given them this opportunity, she had wondered whether or not she should hand in her commission as a ninja. She was ashamed to admit it, but the very idea of delving deeper into this shadow world that she had become a part of terrified her. Up until now, she had never thought that she would have to actually harm people or do things that would send any normal person running for the hills. Surprisingly, it wasn't Sasuke that convinced her to take the chance, it was Naruto. Despite her dislike for the blonde-haired idiot, she had noticed how hard he tried. She saw how no one, not even herself, she was ashamed to admit, ever gave him a single bit of help other than that Anbu lady who seemed to care about him, a cousin, maybe. Sure, she knew about Hinata's intense crush on him, but that girl was so pathologically shy that she could never say more than a word or two before turning into a tomato. Naruto was constantly trying to find things out on his own. She had originally thought his life was an ideal one, no parents to boss you around, no siblings to annoy you, she herself was an only child, but she'd babysitted often enough to know how annoying brothers and sisters could be. It wasn't until Sakura had talked to Sasuke that she finally realized how painful it was not to have a mother or father to come home and cry to. She wondered now which of the two of her boys had it worse. Sasuke's family had been slaughtered and he had seen it happen, but at least he had the memories of his family loving and caring about him. Naruto, from everything she'd seen so far, he'd just been abandoned. If his family could do that to a child, what kind of monsters were they? Meh, Sakura-chan. Naruto called out, disrupting her thoughts. Look. We're here. The pink-dressed girl looked up to see the tall red building looming over them. She unconsciously let out a sigh of relief. Whatever her problems, she knew she could count on Naruto and Sasuke to help her through them, and she would help them achieve their goals. No matter what. The group stared at the strange sign with a mixture of curiosity and frustration. The frustration was mostly on Naruto's part. What the heck does this mean? He shouted, causing his teammates to wince. The trio of genin were staring up at a large mural inside the hall that they had just entered. Parts of it were missing, and it kept talking about things like gain knowledge and run the fields. Maybe it has something to do with the scrolls? Sakura asked, rubbing her left ear to try and rid it of the ringing caused by the blonde's shout. The proctor lady did say it that we shouldn't open them till we got to the tower, maybe they complete this message. Sasuke frowned. But what if we're not supposed to open them at all? She did say that this was a test of how we handled confidential information. Just opening the scrolls now seems like a waste of time, he countered. Naruto pulled the 2 scrolls from his hip pouch and looked at them. I dunno, if delivering the scrolls was all that was needed, then why isn't anyone here to pick them up? He asked. I think Sakura-chan is right. We should open them up. Sasuke found he couldn't argue with that, so he nodded. He reached over and took a hold of the Kai scroll, while Naruto held onto the 10th scroll. The raven-haired boy reached into his thigh pouch and withdrew a kunai to slice away the tie, keeping the scroll wrapped. Wait. Sakura cried out, causing the 2 boys to wince. They turned to her with questioning gazes, and she blushed. Sorry, she said, but I think we should open them at the same time. If the whole point was to get both scrolls, then it would make sense that they go together. We could trigger a trap if we open only one. Naruto and Sasuke looked at one another, then nodded. Brilliant as ever, Sakura-chan, Naruto grinned at the girl, say. I am not going on a date with you after this, Naruto, the pink-haired girl growled. Just checking, the shorter boy replied, cowering back slightly. Sasuke smirked at the byplay before looking at Naruto. On the count of 3? He asked. The blonde nodded, pulling a kunai of his own out. 1, 2, 3. They shouted together, slicing the bindings and opening the scrolls. But the Sakura muttered, staring at the characters written on the paper, those symbols call forth man. Shimada. Sasuke cursed, tossed them away at some kind of summoning jutsu. He hurled the Kai scroll forward as Naruto did the same. The scrolls landed, crossing over each other, and a billow of smoke arose from the seals. When it cleared, a young woman stood before them, dressed in the standard Anbu armor and wearing a cat mask which she proceeded to unhook and remove from her face. Congratulations, she said, you 3 have just passed the 2nd stage of the Chunin exams. Naruto gaped at the figure, then grinned widely. Yugao-nichan. He shouted, rushing forward and grabbing the girl in a fierce hug. Sakura and Sasuke stared, mouthing Yugao-nichan. At the spectacle. I knew you'd do well, Naruto-kun, she smiled down at the boy she'd come to see as a little brother. She still remembered how distrusting his eyes were back when he was 8 years old. To see the open trust in them was staggering. Now, aren't you going to introduce me to your teammates? Hey heh, the blonde Jinchuriki grinned, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Oh no, Sakura-chan, Sasuke, I'd like you to meet Izuki Yugao. She's a member of the Izuki, the branch family of the Uzumaki clan. Yugao smirked. And an outcast, just like Naruto-kun here, she elaborated. So she's your cousin, Naruto? Sakura asked. How come you live on your own, then shouldn't you be staying with your relative? I'm an Anbu, Sakura-san, Yuga replied. I'm rarely at home or even in the village long enough to watch over the gaki here. Gaki Wayu, Naruto growled, even as the purple-haired girl ground her knuckles into his skull. If you're a member of Naruto's family, then what about those other three? Sasuke asked. Naruto said he met them in the forest. Yuga frowned. Uzumaki Taro, the current clan heir, Uzumaki Kenisuke who studies Kenjutsu, and my own little sister, Yuzuki Uraraka, she replied. Unlike Naruto and myself, they're considered full members of the clan. Naruto and I are outcasts. Naruto for something that wasn't even his fault, and myself because I favored my village over my clan. Naruto frowned. Those three, no offense, Nichin, but they're idiots, he spoke up. They revealed almost everything about themselves to me when it was obvious that people were listening. Chalk it up to inexperience, Naruto-kun, she replied. The only missions those three have ever done have been in the capital city of Hinokakujin. How the heck did they make the qualifications for the exam then? Naruto asked. I don't know, she replied. Then she smiled. I do know that when they got here about an hour ago, Ibisu-sen was the one to greet them. Naruto laughed. Ibisu grimaced as he led the arrogant trio through the tower to the chambers that they would be using until the next stage. His patience, already tried by having spent the previous evening with the honorable grandson, was wearing thin at the constant barrage of questions from Taro. What is the outcast capable of, Ibisu-san? The dark-haired heir asked. You mentioned in your correspondence with the council that he had achieved something that should have been impossible. You praised him in the last letter, when up until that point you had nothing but disdain. I have recently been given cause to change my mind about that, Taro Dono, the Takebetsu Jounin replied. Naruto-sen was an almost total loss as a shinobi, even with Yugao-sen's additional training, but in the last few months he has begun to transform into a formidable genin. Ryuka snorted, running a hand through her purple tresses as they continued to walk down the corridor. If he's so formidable, why the hell does he wear that ridiculous orange jumpsuit of his? Doesn't he know the first thing about concealment and camouflage? Ibisu had to stop himself from glaring at the girl. His position as the clan representative for the Uzumaki was tenuous at best, given his recent changes in attitude regarding the clan pariah, and Ryuka was highly praised by both the Yuzuki branch and even the main house. Getting on her bad side, while undoubtedly fun, would only make things difficult for him and his two relatives in the village. Naruto-san wears those clothes because that is all he can afford, the bespectacled man answered. His genin pay, plus the stipend from Hokage-sama is used primarily to stock his weapons, food, and pay the rent on his apartment. He chooses practicality over fashion. Ryuka smirked. With that fashion sense, he'd be lucky to be a court jester back in the capital, she laughed. Ryuka-san, do not underestimate the outcast, Kenisuke muttered. We still do not know what he is truly capable of. Yeah, she muttered. Aro just continued to stare at the back of his elder cousin, Uzumaki Ibisu, while they walked down the hall. You are hiding something, Ibisu, he thought, and I shall find out what. Kakashi, Anko, and the Hokage stared at the mark upon Sasuke's neck with more than a little anger and fear. Atten no Jun. Anko growled, her killing intent laying an almost oppressive feel to the room. Naruto and Sakura looked worried, while Sasuke glanced over in surprise. You know what this is? He asked. The wildly dressed Kunoichi nodded, her hand moving up to her own shoulder. It's Orochimaru's pride and joy, she explained. It gives the bearer an incredible boost of speed, strength, and chakra. While that happens, however, the seal eats away at your will. If you use it too much you become his mindless servant. A puppet with him holding the strings. Sakura gasped, while both Naruto and Sasuke growled. Damn that he be freak. I'm no one's puppet. Not his and not Itachi's. Mama, just calm down you two, Kakashi muttered. Thanks Naruto's efforts, we can contain this now and still let you compete in the exam. Just let Hokage-sama and I do our thing, and we'll have you ready to go. Ah no, Kakashi-sensei? Naruto asked, can I talk to you for a moment before you help Sasuke? It's kind of important. The silver-haired Jounin glanced at his loudmouth pupil, before nodding. Sure, Naruto, he replied. Anko, would you escort Sakura to some quarters while I speak with the gaki? Hey. Yeah, sure, the wild Kunoichi muttered. Come on Pinky, let's give the boys their special time. Could you not call me Pinky? The pink-dressed girl asked. Sure, Pinky. Sigh. So, Naruto, what can I do for you? The silver-haired Cyclops asked his most unusual student. Naruto's normally bright eyes were dark as he looked at his sensei. While he did admire Kakashi's strength and skill, and the man definitely had his respect, Naruto had to admit to himself that he didn't think of his Jonin instructor as much of a teacher. Still, he knew that if anyone could understand his problem, Kakashi was the most likely person. It's about my relatives, the blonde boy replied, practically spitting out the last word. Kakashi had expected this. Given his own feelings regarding family, Naruto's rage was easy to understand. His own father had abandoned him when he committed suicide, leaving him to fight for his own livelihood. It was difficult to admit, but even after Obito's words to him that day and his own acceptance of his father's legacy, he still had some resentment towards Akumo. In his case, however, his father was dead. Naruto's family, they had just left him behind. I ran into them in the forest, Naruto continued. I know it's wrong, but you wanted to make them pay for all the pain you've had to feel all these years, Kakashi muttered, placing his hand on the boy's shoulder. Naruto nodded, not trusting his own voice at the moment. While it is true that those three genin are not the ones responsible for what happened to you, it is understandable why you would want them to feel what you felt. But if you're going to say that makes you no better than the Kyuubi, then shut up right now, the Jonin replied, almost snapping at the short boy. You may have wanted them to feel the same pain you felt, but you didn't hurt them. You kept that legendary temper of yours in check, and that's a sign of how much you've grown as a shinobi. Naruto looked up in shock, and Kakashi continued on that vein. I told you before the first test that I was proud of the three of you, but truth be told, I was proudest of all in you, Naruto. Naruto felt his eyes watering at that. Kakashi-sensei. Now, go rest up and focus on what comes next, the silver-haired man ordered. I'm going to help Hokage-sama seal up Sasuke's curse mark and then we'll meet up for the next exam. Hi. Thanks, sensei. The energetic blonde replied before rushing off after Sakura and Anko. Kakashi's uncovered eye lingered on the boy as he vanished down the corridor. Sarutobi walked up behind him, puffing on his long pipe. You didn't tell him, the elderly ninja muttered. No, Kakashi answered, shaking his head, how could I? At this stage, after how far he's come since that night, do you think he'll handle it any better when he finds out in 2 days? I don't know. Sarutobi sighed. Well, what's done is done, he said, now, let's seal up my foolish student's mistake and prepare for the next round. Heiei-kun will proctor the third stage. Kakashi smiled. Well, at least Naruto will like that. So, you learned nothing from Ibisu? No, he was very tight-lipped about the entire situation, Taro replied, as he and his two teammates knelt before their sensei. We did not make contact with Yuzuki Yugao either. We do know that she has helped the outcast in training from time to time, but nothing can account for the rumors we have heard about his supposed strength. I should have known you'd fail at something so simple, Taro-kun, a new voice came from the side. The three Uzumaki genin turned to see a young woman leaning against the wall. She was dressed in a simple dark blue jumpsuit with black borders and piping along the seams, and a dark green chunin vest was worn open on her slim shoulders. Her pale blue hair was done up in a side ponytail, and her hit-eye-8 was secured around her forehead. Her attractive face bore an unappealing smirk, and her shocking blue eyes seemed to cut into the Uzumaki air. Ryuka snarled at that. Taro-kun did not fail. She snapped at the other girl, there was no, "When I want your opinion, I'll figure it out for myself, Yuzuki," the other girl replied, cutting the purple-haired Kunoichi off in mid-rant. Ryuka-san, please, do not disrespect the main family, Kenosuke, ever the peacemaker of the group, muttered to the indignant girl. Kanena-sama, I do not need your opinion either, Kenosuke-kun, the girl, Uzumaki Kana replied. That is enough from all of you. The sensei snapped, quieting the four before Taro could add his own opinion on the matter. It is regrettable that you learned nothing of the boy's skills, but for now it is of little concern. Take rest and prepare for the next stage. Hi, sensei, the three genin replied, bowing and walking out of the room. I expect better from you, Kana, the sensei spoke up after a lengthy pause. Hana sniffed. Since when is that any different from usual? She replied, standing and walking towards the door. You will show me proper respect, young lady. The blue-haired girl snorted at that. I speak only the truth, she laughed, after all isn't that how you taught me to act, Okasama? 2 days later, Sarutobi looked over the remaining genin with a critical eye as he explained the purpose for the Chunin exams. His eyes swept over the newly sealed Sasuke with concern, before settling on his orange-clad teammate with equal concern. The boy was glaring at the hauntingly beautiful woman standing next to Kurenai, while her own electric blue eyes seemed to bore both into the blonde genin and himself with equal measure. Make no mistake, the oldest living Kage's voice rang out over the 24 Chunin hopefuls, you are fighting for the pride of your village and for the pride of your countries. That, more than anything else, is the real purpose of the Chunin exam. His eyes landed upon the team comprised of Naruto's relatives, and he was forced to repress the urge to scowl. He had nothing against the trio personally, but the way they stood there, full of unearned arrogance and swagger, when not 5 feet away was a member of their clan who had had to fight for everything he had ever had, it sickened him. How far has that clan fallen since you left us, Arashi? He wondered. Cough cough oh no, Hokage-sama. A new voice came, as a pale, haggard-looking ninja wearing the standard jounin attire as well as a katana strapped to his back, appeared in front of the group. Naruto's eyes widened, and his face, which had been set in a serious, at least for him, scowl, broke into a large grin. Oh I hate senpai. he shouted, causing the entire assembly to stare at him. Yuigao, who stood behind Sarutobi, smirked beneath her mask as she noticed the Jounin with the dark blue hair to the left scowl at the boy. "Ah, cough Naruto-kun," the sickly Jounin greeted the smiling youth. "I had a feeling you'd make it this far." Naruto smiled even wider. "Oh, I ain't stopping here, senpai." He replied, "I'm going all the way." Dadabeo. "What a disgrace," Taro muttered, loud enough for all assembled to hear. Naruto simply leveled a glare at the Uzumaki heir before turning back to the front. "Ahem," he continued, clearing his throat, "now, cough before we begin." So it continued, as Kabuto the strange white-haired kid from the first exam dropped from the running, and the first match was decided. Okada Yoroi vs Uchiha Sasuke. The match was interesting, if a bit anticlimactic. Yoroi's chakra Kaiu and no jutsu caught Sasuke by surprise for a few moments, but the raven-haired Uchiha quickly broke free. From there, it was a simple matter of whose Taijutsu was superior, and with a borrowed mule kick and cage bio from Lee, Sasuke's shy Renden quickly ended the fight. As Sasuke walked back up to his team, he took a moment to stop next to a shaking Lee. "You still have me on Taijutsu, Lee-san," he muttered, "I know you were still holding back. I promise, when your match starts I won't use my Sharingan. That Taijutsu is yours, I'll get stronger my own way." I and Kakashi both looked at the two young men with great pride as Lee smiled and extended his hand. "Yosh, Sasuke-san," Lee replied, "I truly look forward to facing you again someday when neither of us has any reason to hold back. Such a match would surely demonstrate the power of our youth." "Alright," the Uchiha Saiyan muttered, sweat drops forming on the back of his head. Naruto smirked as the dark-haired boy rejoined them. "Nice fight, team," he crowed, but it seemed kinda cheap there at the end. "You just make sure you give it your all as well, dope," he replied, "besides you're one of the people I want to fight the most." Naruto's mouth clamped shut at that, and for a moment his eyes seemed to water. Sasuke had just given him what he had sought after more than anything else save the title of Hokage acknowledgement. "Oh, I'll win alright. Dadabeo." The blonde grinned as the raven-haired boy smirked back. "Boy," Sakura muttered, even as Kakashi shook his head. The groups turned to the screen as the second match finally came up. Uzumaki Kensuke vs Sabaku no Kankuro. The sword-wielding youth calmly walked down to the arena, his mind already focusing on the task ahead. His face was set in a cold mask, and his blue-gray eyes were like flecks of steel. His opponent, the black-garbed Sunanin Kankuro, smirked as he looked at the sword strapped to Kensuke's side. "Huh," he said, "and here I thought this was supposed to be an exam for shinobi, instead I'm fighting some wannabe samurai. I'm almost insulted." Kensuke frowned. "I am a shinobi," he replied, "though I will admit, I am not all that skilled at ninjutsu and jinjutsu. As for Taijutsu, regrettably, though I am of the main family of the Uzumaki, I am only tolerably proficient in the family style." He drew his sword with a flourished motion, his chakra already flowing through the blade as well as his legs. "My true talent is indeed Kenjutsu, and that is more than enough for someone like you." Kankuro laughed. "So you're a close-range fighter," he chuckled, "and you think that's more than enough? Kid, I'm so gonna enjoy this." He slung the wrapped bundle off of his back, dropping it to the ground with a loud thump. "You say your Taijutsu sucks, huh? Well, let's see just how poor you are." Hey, standing near the Hitsugi statue, frowned. "This Kankuro is hiding something," he thought, "what's he planning?" Kensuke frowned. "If you are choosing to go hand to sword, then you are truly a fool, Sunanin," he muttered. "I had heard that the Wind Daimyo had been seeking other villages to perform missions. I see why now if Sunagakure's nins are so incompetent as to rush into a battle they cannot win." Up in the stands Naruto was frowning. "He doesn't get it," the blonde boy muttered. Sakura and Sasuke were nodding as well. Shikamaru sighed. "Mendasuke," he muttered, "and here I thought Naruto was the idiot of our age." Ino and Chaoji gave their teammate funny looks. "What do you mean?" Ino asked. "This guy may sound like an arrogant jerk, but he does have the advantage if that Suna kid attacks him with bare hands." "I don't get it either," Chaoji muttered around a mouthful of chips, bar BK at the moment. "Just watch, their sensei," Sarutobi Asuma replied around his cigarette, "and remember your lessons on deception." Cough cough cough. Second match, Hayate announced, Sabaku no Kankuro vs Uzumaki Kensuke Hajime. Kensuke began spinning his sword in front of himself, the tip of the blade glowing blue as his chakra surged through it. As he spun the blade around, a spiral-like image began to appear. Kankuro frowned. "What the heck," he whispered, even as he felt his opponent's chakra surge. Kensuke's eyes closed as the spiral completed and he slowly brought the sword down to his right side, both hands now resting on the hilt. The entire blade began to glow blue, and for a few brief seconds that seemed to span an eternity, nothing in the arena moved. Still, the spiral image remained hovering in the air between the two combatants, almost as if it could sustain itself. Suddenly, the spiral flashed out of existence, and Kensuke's eyes opened. With a sudden burst of chakra, he shot forwards at his opponent, crying out as he did, "Genjutsu Higi. Uzumaki Yeba no Mai." Sword art secret. Dance of the spiral blade. There was a series of blue flashes as the blade stabbed forward, following the spiral pattern that had been visible only a few seconds before. Konosuke's arms were a blur, even as his steel-like eyes flashed with killer intent. With one last stab, Konosuke performed a spinning slash that launched the Sunanin up and back, landing on the ground behind his package with a heavy thud. The pen may be mightier than the sword, the white-garbed Uzumaki spoke, but the sword will trump the hand any day of the week. He turned to the proctor. I believe that the match is over, sensei. I shall rejoin my team. Ha 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 ha, came the voice of his opponent, who says we're done, sword boy. Konosuke leapt backward, turning his eyes to the bundle on the ground even as it unraveled, revealing the same ninja he had just finished annihilating. How? He muttered, before noticing a blue glow around the boy's fingers. He turned to the other Kankuro, noticing it begin to stand, even as bits and pieces of the clothes fell off, revealing a brown-garbed monstrosity with 4 arms and 3 eyes. You can stab him all you want, Kankuro laughed, but that alone won't stop Karasu. I see, the brown-haired boy replied, one of the trademark techniques of Sunagaku Kugutsu no Jutsu. You're a puppeteer. Kankuro laughed. You really must be green if you couldn't see my deception, he said, hell, even that annoying orange punk up there saw it before you did. Konosuke frowned, sparing a glance at Naruto, who was smirking at him. A ninja's first task is to see underneath, the outcast called out to him, but then, I don't expect someone who hasn't done any real missions to understand that. The sword-wielding boy scowled, before leaping away while pulling a small flask from his dogi. Since it seems I will be fighting something unexpected, he spoke, I guess I'll have to act accordingly. I was hoping to save this technique for the finals, oh well, it is not to be. He opened the flask, pouring oil onto his blade. He flashed through a quick 3-seal sequence, and then blew a small puff of flame at the blade. The oil ignited, and the flames surged. Kenjutsu. Uzumaki Kaji Ken no Mai. This time you will fall. Sword art. Dance of the spiral fire sword. Kankuro laughed. Flashy and cool looking, I'll give you that, he shouted, even as he manipulated the chakra strings connected to Karasu, forcing the construct to move around, weapons shifting into position for assault, but the problem is that oil will only last for so long, and then the fire will die out. You won't have time to get through my defenses before it goes off, and even then, you still have to get to me. Konosuke smirked. The fire will die out. He asked, now, what makes you think that the fire will die out? As Kankuro's eyes widened, he laughed. Indeed. The oil and that small Kaiten jutsu were simply catalysts to start the dance. Once the fire ignites, all it needs to keep going is chakra. Kankuro frowned. So that should mean you'd have to cancel the jutsu even faster, he muttered, something like that must eat up chakra faster than a school of piranha eating a cow. The Uzumaki swordsman shook his head. That would be true if not for my sword, he replied, my sword is like a chakra storage battery. I've had it by my side since I could walk, slowly filling it with my chakra. Like certain seals, this sword can compress the chakra, building it up until I need to use it. All it takes then is a small jutsu of any elemental type to activate its powers. Kankuro's eyes widened at that. That's right, Sunanin. Kaji-ken is but one of several elemental dances I have, not that you'll see the others. You will fall here. Karasu. Kankuro shouted, the puppet surging forward, arms snapping out to launch a volley of kunai at the sword-wielding youth. Konosuke surged his chakra to his legs, leaping above the projectiles, spinning around to slash at the puppet, only for it to dance out of range. The battle had only just begun. Sakura glanced at the kunais now littering the ground. She saw some kind of black ichor dripping off of several of them, and she gasped. Those kunai, they're drenched in poison. She spoke, horrified at the thought. It makes sense, Kakashi explained. Kugutsu no Jutsu is a mid-range fighting style, but even with a sturdy puppet, it can be overcome rather easily. Most puppeteers add special weapons and poisons to their creations. More often than not, a puppeteer will have a knowledge of poisons rivaling that of a fully trained medical ninja. Atsunanin has been taking this match seriously since the very start. Hyuga, the silent teammate of Rock Lee, spoke up, that Uzumaki boy underestimated him from the very beginning. Several feet away, Yuzuki Ryuka laughed. At the looks from the other people on their balcony, she spoke. Konosuke never underestimates anyone, she said, he deliberately makes people think he has. That Sunanin has no chance in this fight. How do you figure that? Tenten asked. Because Konosuke could have finished this without the Kaji-ken no Mai, Taro spoke up, not looking away from the fight, even as his sensei stiffened behind him. Konosuke only uses his elemental dances when he wants to make a statement. So far all he's stated is that he's an idiot, Naruto growled, also not looking away from the fight. He felt a pair of eyes boring into the back of his head, but he chose to ignore them, intent on watching the match. He's gonna lose. Dadabeo. Kankuro frowned as he made Karasu dance away from the fiery sword yet again. I hate to admit it, but this kid is good, he thought as his puppet launched a volley of needles at the boy, only for him to whip his blade around and deflect the poison projectiles. I've already had to reveal so much of Karasu's workings to this crowd. I was hoping to save them for the plan, but I guess I'll have to use them now. Inosuke glared at the Sunanin, noting his fingers moving in a complicated pattern. He's gearing up for something big, he thought, I have to end this now. He began surging his chakra through his blade, increasing the heat and power of the flames around his sword. He began to spin in place, the flames circling around him as he concentrated on his plan. Now. Kankuro shouted, even as Karasu split in two, the legs and lower body separating from the top and arms as a second head emerged, its mouth opening and revealing a cannon-like interior mounting. The top half swung its arms forward, launching a new volley of poison kunai, even as Kenosuke called out his technique. Haji Ken Kouden. Ryamai. Fire Sword second part. Dragon Dance. He finished his spin with a powerful double-handed forward slash, a surge of flame leaping from the blade, catching the kunais in its wake and hurling them away. The wall of fire caught the upper half of Karasu, knocking it away, even as the lower half launched a small sphere that exploded at the boy's feet, a cloud of gas flowing up and into his lungs. Poison gas bomb. As he slumped over. Kankuro leapt away from the flames, bringing the lower half of Karasu around to aim a blade at the stricken boy's throat. You got some skills, punk, the black-garbed boy chuckled, but for a skilled puppeteer, using two puppets at once is a piece of cake. Now yield. I have the antidote to that poison. Surrender, and it's yours. I cough will not bow to such filth. Kenosuke growled. HMMPH, fine, Kankuro frowned, seems like the spoiled samurai wannabe wants to die honorably. Well, I got a news flash for you, sword boy. He bent down, whispering into Kenosuke's ear. We're ninja, we don't do honorable deaths. Heiei interrupted them. Shasha, Sabaku no Kankuro, he said, before launching into his own coughing fit. Kankuro-san, please hand cough me the antidote. Kankuro shrugged, before tossing a small packet to the pale jounin. Steep it in some tea and have him drink it, he instructed, it'll taste like crap, but it'll purge the poison from his system. He doesn't deserve the honor of dying by my poisons. He gave the kneeling boy another glare. Idiots who don't know when to quit are usually the first to die on the battlefield. With a few quick motions, he had Karasu reassembled and rewrapped before he shunshined back to his waiting teammates. Inosuke was led out by the medics. Ryuka scowled as her cousin was carried out by the attendees. How? She growled, Kenosuke is the best Kenjutsu student in all of our clan. Ero frowned at his cousin's outburst. Calm yourself, Ryuka, he berated the shorter girl. Kenosuke made a mistake when judging that Sunanin. As pathetic as that is, he still surpasses many of the others here. He let his gaze fall upon Naruto, as well as the pair of Hyuga present, though they lingered on the girl longer than was necessary. Behind him, Uzumaki Kagura was frowning, but for a different reason. Though her eyes were not upon him at the moment, her thoughts were focused on the orange-clad form of her son. How could they let him become a shinobi? She wondered, as the computer began cycling through names once more, even if he has skills, what of the beast inside him? To allow him to fight would allow the Kyuubi to influence him. Sarutobi, what have you done? After so many years, it was easy to ignore the voice inside her asking what she had done as well. The computer cycled through the names, before finally settling on a new pair. Kanuta Dosu vs Aburam Shino. A strange genin from the village of Odo leapt down into the arena, even as his opponent walked down the stairs at a far more sedate pace. Ah no, Shino-san, Hinata spoke, do your best. Yeah, kick his ass, Aburam. Kiba laughed, teammate sweeping the prelims. Now that'd be cool. Shino sighed as he continued into the arena, his eyes staying locked onto his opponent. The bandaged-wrapped Odonin was rubbing the strange device attached to his left arm. His family was already reacting to it, especially his queen, Sachiko. They didn't like the strange noises coming from it. Odo indeed, he thought, as the sickly proctor made the announcement. Cough Aburam Shino vs Sachin Dosu, hey, muttered, Hajim. So I get some no-name ninja, instead of that Uzumaki punk, Dosu muttered, his hands coming together in the Hibi seal, I guess I'll just have to make this quick. Shino made no reply, even as his Kakechu began flowing in waves out of his jacket, surrounding him in a fog of black and moving legs. You would do best to not underestimate me, he replied quietly, like so many things in the life of a ninja, there is more to me than meets the eye. Dosu's one visible eye widened at the sight of so many bugs. What the hell, what are you? He growled out. A shinobi, was the only reply. The trench coat-wearing genin thrust his arms forward, the sea of insects hurling itself at the bandaged genin. Dosu leapt back, his hands flying through a quick seal sequence. Hibi, Tora, Seru, Inu, Hibi. Ninpu. Doku Odo Ken. Ninja art. Poison sound fist. His chakra surged, a visible distortion wave pushing through the air and impacting against the multi-legged army storming towards him. The swarm seemed to pause, then began scattering wildly about the room. Shino's eyes widened behind his glasses, even as he leapt away from his competitor who swung his fist in a wide arc that ended at the ground. That was sloppy, he thought, why would what? He vaguely noticed his peers gasping as he fell to the ground, his stomach emptying its meager contents. His vision blurred, even as he glared at Dosu, who had paused his assault. Just now feeling it, aren't you? The Odo Nin spoke, his voice ringing painfully in Shino's ears. Sound waves. They can disintegrate stone, heal wounds, or even disrupt the inner ear. He knelt down. Your insects are no exception. Confuse them with a burst of noise pollution, and it leaves you open. Shino focused his mind through the pain, and he began tapping his fingers in what looked like a random pattern. He forced himself to his feet before motioning to his family to reassemble. Dosu frowned before raising his arm and flicking a finger against the metal of his gauntlet. A sharp ringing sound echoed through the arena, causing several people to wince in pain, while Shino groaned as the full force of the sound wave impacted against him. "Give it up, punk," Dosu growled, "I could have beat you from the very start." He raised his hand again. "This time I'll use a tone that'll make it seem like you're being shredded by a saw. I shudder to think what that'll do to your bugs." "You won't get the chance," Shino muttered, as the insect surged forward again, spinning around the surprised Nin in a miniature tornado. The buzzing of the insect seemed to grow louder and softer at random intervals, almost as if the Kikai were all talking at once. Dosu felt the bugs begin to crawl on his body, and he quickly flicked his fingers against the gauntlet in a 3-tap sequence, creating a set of tones that caused Akamaru, Kiba, and Naruto up in the stands to wince in agony, while the Odo Kunoichi Kin also winced. The Kikai seemed to take great offense at the strange tone, and large numbers of them circled around the strange device, covering the holes and biting into the skin underneath. "Erg!" Dosu screamed as several of the poisonous Kikai bites began to burn. Even as he screamed, he could feel himself growing weaker. "My chakra," he thought, even as he saw the Aburam boy straighten up. "You must feel it now," the quiet boy muttered, his voice penetrating the swarm's buzzing. "My Kikai feed off of chakra. While they block your weapon, they also leech the chakra from you, leaving you open." How Dosu whimpered as the bugs continued to drain his strength. "When I was tapping my fingers," the sunglassed boy replied, "insects do communicate through sound, but that isn't the only way. Bees, for example, can communicate information to their colonies by dancing in a particular pattern. My Kikai can do the same, and I can talk to them by simulating the dance by the rhythms of my fingers. They feel me tapping in a unique pattern, and they know what to do." Shino smirked behind his jacket as Dosu fell to the ground, his family returning to him. He briefly noted that Akane, one of Sachiko's more temperamental daughters, was not happy with the taste of the chakra she'd just consumed. He spared a glance at the prone form of his opponent. "You couldn't beat me," he said, "because you underestimated me." "Shaosha, Aburam Shino," Hade muttered. "This batch of rookies, just how strong are they?" He wondered. "Wow, now that was so cool." Naruto grinned, turning to Kiba, "Man, that Shino guy is strong, huh Kiba?" Kiba smirked at the loud mouth. "Oh yeah," he replied, "I'm glad I didn't have to fight him. Shino's got the best chance of our team at making Chunin, but I'm still gonna beat him to it." "Ha! I'll beat you both to it, dog breath." The orange-clad boy laughed. "What'd you say, punk?" The Inyazuka boy growled, the pair going off into an insult match. "Ah no, Kiba-san, Naruto-kun," Hinata muttered, Please don't fight." "Ah, this isn't fighting, Hinata-chan," Naruto grinned, garnering a blush from the Hyuga girl, "this is practice." "What practice?" Kiba muttered, confused, "Practice for what, you idiot?" "Practice for me humiliating you like I always do." Naruto grinned, earning several chuckles from the assembled genin. "Oh, I'm going to get you for that, you ramen-loving dope." Kiba growled. Naruto laughed, even as Hinata blushed at being so close to the boy she admired. Kurenai smirked at her wild genin's boast, even as Hinata blushed. She noticed the gaze Hinata directed towards Naruto. "Oh dear," she thought, "so that's why you always seem so distracted during our missions." She smiled. "Good for you, Hinata." Uzumaki Kagura also noticed the gaze. Hyuga blushing at him. Her thoughts were interrupted as a new match was determined. Tsuchi-kin vs Abaku no Tamari. Kin frowned as she stared at the taller Kunoichi. That weapon on her back could be a problem, she thought, even as the proctors started their match. "I have to make it through this round." "Trying to figure out how to beat me?" Tamari asked. "I got news for you, whatever sound technique you use, I can beat it." She pulled the black object from behind her back, letting the bottom edge hit the ground. "My Dai Tessin has 3 moons. I'm giving you 2 chances to give up. If I open it to the 3rd moon you will lose." Gin glared at the girl. "A Futon user," she thought, "that means my bells won't work unless I can get them behind her." She slid into a standard Iwa Taijutsu stance, uncaring of the frowns directed at her from the majority of the Konohinin present. "I'll just have to try something different." She leapt into the air, smirking at the Suna girl's confusion. Her hands began to blur through a sequence. Hibi, Inu, Seru, Tori, Ryu, Hitsugi, Hibi. Doten. Jishin Ken. Earth release. Earthquake fist, she cried, slamming her palm to the ground, a sudden surge of chakra leaving her body, a break appearing in the floor as the ground began to shake. Damari leapt into the air, even as Kin whipped out a set of her senbon, hurling them at the blonde girl. The blonde frowned, whipping her fan open to the first moon and scattering the needles, causing a faint ringing sound to be heard. Her eyes darting to the source of the sound, locating several needles with bells attached. So, that's her game, she thought. In began another seal sequence as the Suna girl landed. Ending with the Tori seal, she called out a new jutsu. Doten. Ritsuda Tensho. Earth release. Split earth turn around the palm. A bunch of debris from the floor rose up and began circling around her opponent even as she readied another set of senbon with bells. She flung them at the wall behind Tamari as the Suna girl called out her own technique. Duetin. Kazutachi and K. Wind release. Wind scythe circle, the debris seemed to break apart into slices, the dust blowing away to reveal Tamari's fan open to the second moon. I'm onto you now, girl. She shouted, swinging the fan to unleash a gust of wind at the Odo girl. In cried out as the winds hurled her into the opposite wall, her body screaming in agony. She was sure at least a few ribs had cracked under the force of impact, and her legs seemed to cry out in pain as well. Damari frowned as the dark-haired girl stood up. What are you standing for? She called out, you know I won't let you use those bells like that Dosu guy used that arm of his. You can toss all the senbon you want and you won't be able to hit me. You only have one more chance, then all 3 moons will be visible. I have to face that Uzumaki, Kin groaned, he has to pay for my sister. What? Tamari asked. I'm from Tsuchi no Kuni, the dark-dressed girl continued, my sister was an Iwa Kunoichi. Naruto frowned. I don't like the sound of this, he wondered. She was raped and mutilated by the Uzumaki clan. The girl screeched, I was 4 when she died. She took a few steadying breaths before glaring at the Suna girl. I will make that clan pay. She glanced up at Naruto and was surprised to see a strange look in his eyes. Compassion and understanding. I can't say I know your pain, Tamari replied, I don't have a sister, but I do care for my brothers. Her eyes darted to Gaara, who continued to glower at the floor underneath him, I can tell you want justice, but you won't get it today. She calmly slipped the fan open again, this time showing all 3 moons. Still, you are pretty good. I don't think I'd have gotten as good a fight from the other Kunoichi here. In focused her chakra, trying to attach some strings to the bells, even as Tamari swung the fan. Duetin. Kamitachi. The winds buffeted against the prone girl, her mind succumbing to the sweet darkness. So that's why she wanted to fight Taro and the others so badly, Naruto thought, her pain she misses her family. He frowned as he spared a glance at the blue-haired Jonin standing behind Taro and Ryaika. I guess I can understand that loneliness. The computer began cycling through names again, and Naruto's eyes widened at the next match. Izuki Ryaika vs Uzumaki Naruto. Hinata stared at the screen, then looked over to the person she admired the most. She managed to hold back the gasp that threatened to escape her lips as she looked into the brilliant blue eyes that defined Naruto so much. She recalled one of the few lessons that her mother, Shikuko, had managed to pass on to her before succumbing to the illness that had taken hold of her after the birth of Hanabi. She had said that no matter how well trained a shinobi was, their eyes would always tell the true story. Naruto-kun, she thought, as the blue eyes she had come to adore clouded over with rage and pain, what did they do to you? Why does it hurt you so much? The blonde genin started making his way down to the fighting area even as his opponent started to chuckle. Well, what fortuitous circumstance is this? The purple-haired Kunoichi called Ryaika laughed, I'm so sorry, Taro-kun. She turned her brown eyes to the dark-haired Uzumaki. I know you wanted to be the one to beat the outcast down, but I guess you'll just have to do with watching it happen. Taro grunted. Feel free, Ryaika, he replied, I just want a good show. I'm sure we all do. He turned to look at the woman standing behind him, nah, Kagura-sensei. Hinata turned to the blue-haired woman, frowning at the lack of emotion on her face. Why would she? The blue-haired beauty spoke only a few words, but they washed over the assembled genin like a frozen wave, the lack of emotion causing even the stoic Niji to raise an eyebrow. Win your match, Ryaika, she intoned, do not disappoint us. Ryaika frowned. Hi, Kagura-sensei, she replied, forming the Hitsugi seal and shunshuing down into the arena. Kakashi and Asuma had turned to the blue-haired woman, their eyes hard as she returned their glare. Are you planning on berating me, Kakashi-kun, Asuma-kun? The Uzumaki matron asked. I followed the wishes of the clan. Nothing more. Kakashi's voice was as cold as ice as he responded. I think he'd be ashamed of you, the silver-haired Jounin replied. He told me Obito's words were something to take to heart. I would have thought you, as his wife, would have honored his wishes above even the clan. Asuma took a puff off the cigarette in his mouth. I think I'm ashamed of you myself, sensei, he added, causing his own students to stare up at him in shock. I'd always thought you were better than that. Kagura frowned, then turned to watch the events in the arena, closing herself off from the glares of her late husband's student and her own former pupil. The match was about to begin. Naruto stared at the purple-haired girl before him, his mind focused solely on her as Hayate announced the match. "This match, Uzumaki Naruto vs Yuzuki Ryaika," he muttered, coughing slightly, "Hajime." Ryaika smirked as she backflipped away from the blonde boy, putting some distance between herself and the scowling boy. "You know," she said, "we've heard of your so-called exploits even in Hinokakujin, outcast." She frowned when Naruto showed no reaction to her words. "We even heard about that mission your team took to Nami no Kuni C rank to A rank and successfully completed to boot." She smirked. "Of course, given that your team had the famous Sharingan no Kakashi and you have the last of the Uchiha, well, I can certainly see who did all the work." Naruto frowned. "Are you gonna fight or try and talk me to death?" he asked. "I don't care what insults you throw at me after almost 9 years, I'm numb to it." Ryaika frowned before sliding into a strange taijutsu stance. Her hands were broad in front of her body, one fist closed and near her face, while the other was set like a claw, away from her chest. She turned slightly to the side, keeping her eyes on the blonde before her. "Uzumaki Kuren Taijutsu. Hyogi. Uzumaki Clan Taijutsu. Open skill." Her opponent frowned before shifting into his own taijutsu stance, one that left the Yuzuki girl gaping in surprise. He brought his hands together before him, raising them up to chin level, turning his body slightly and widening his stance. His blue eyes seemed to flash in defiance of the girl, and his face developed a strange smirk. "Impossible," was the only thought Ryaika could contemplate. "Is that stance?" Taro was growling up on the gangway. The other rookies glanced at him as he seethed in rage. How dare he use that style? He has no right. Kakashi chuckled. "Actually, since it was taught to him by your clan," he stated, causing the dark-haired boy to scowl, "he has every right to use the Igi Ryu. Shadow skill." Asuma spared a glance at Kagura, noting that her eyes had changed. Before, they were just solid chips of ice when staring at the blonde boy she had abandoned. Now, however, there was emotion in those orbs, shock being the most prevalent of all. Ryaika snarled as she began to circle Naruto, her eyes instinctively seeking out his feet. "I've sparred against Taro-kun in Kanon Asama," she thought. "I may not know the style, but I do know how to fight it. If I keep my eyes on his footwork, I can easily counter his moves. If you're not going to start, then I will." Naruto shouted, his hands flying through a seal sequence, ending on the Ryu seal. Fuetin. Atsugai. Wind release. Great pressure. Ryaika leapt to the side, barely avoiding the gust of wind, her hands flying through her own seal sequence, ending on Tori. Suitin. Tepudama. Water release. Water bullet. She spat forth a mid-sized sphere of water, forcing Naruto to backflip away. Ryaika rushed forward, grabbing one of Naruto's outstretched arms, and, with a pivot on her left foot, sent the orange-clad genin hurling towards the western wall. She followed with another seal sequence, this one ending with Ryu. Fuetin. Renkiden. Wind release. Drilling air bullet, a burst of howling wind shot from her hands, impacting against the blonde boy and further propelling him into the wall. His impact was announced with a large boom and a deep impression in the wall. "Naruto!" Sakura cried out as the rookies gasped at their friend's hard impact. Naruto-kun Hinata whimpered, her hands clasped together as if in prayer for her crush. Kakashi, Gai, Kurenai and Asuma collectively winced at the force of the impact. Kurenai was the first to make a comment. First she used Tepudama, then switched easily to Renkiden, she muttered, both of those techniques require a good deal of control, yet she used them so quickly. Taro laughed. "And now you can see her real power," he muttered, causing the group to glare at him. Ryaika is a prodigy of the Hyogi style of the Uzumaki Ryu, but she knows a ninja can't function on taijutsu alone. He ignored the glare sent his way by the boy with the overly large eyebrows and horrendous haircut in fashion sense. Ryaika has incredible control and stamina, but she doesn't believe in wasting chakra. Sure, she can use powerful techniques like Suryudan and others, but why use something like that when a properly applied Tepudama will do the same job? Kakashi frowned beneath his mask. "So, she uses jutsu like Hausenka and Renkiden, he asked. "It's what earned Ryaika her nickname in the clan and in the capital city," the Uzumaki heir answered. "Ryaika no Dangan. Ryaika of the bullet." Ryaika panted as the dust settled from the force of Naruto's impact. She could almost feel her chakra coils groaning in protest to her constant use of multiple elemental ninjutsu. "Damn, I went overboard with that," she thought as the debris settled, beginning to reveal the cracks on the wall from her cousin's collision. "To think I used up so much chakra on the likes Nani?" she screeched as her thoughts were echoed by the people above. The dust had finally settled, revealing not one, but 5 Narutos standing there, a quickly fading plume of white smoke behind the center one. That one wore the same cocksure grin that had made him famous among the rookie 9, as a total and complete fool. Now most of them were starting to wonder about that. Clever, Kakashi muttered, his one visible eye curved into the upside-down U that signified him smiling, quick thinking on the fly. Well, that's to be expected from the number one prankster in our village. Sakura was a bit more vocal in her praise of the blonde. Yeah. Go Naruto. That's the way to do it. Sasuke, standing next to her, merely smirked, even if he was deeply impressed with his teammate. Ino was gaping in shock at the sight, as were Choji and Shikamaru. What but how? He should be a pancake right now, Ino was stuttering. Shikamaru, just how strong do you think Naruto's become since he learned that jutsu? Choji asked, munching on his chips at breakneck or maybe break-tooth speed. Strong enough to be Mendasuke, Shikamaru replied, sighing as Ino continued to screech. Man, what a drag. Hiba was laughing at the scene, while Shino kept his usual stoic facade. Kurenai was smirking, but more at her third charge than at the events below. Hinata's face was bright red, as was par for the course when dealing with the blonde loudmouth. Her fingers constantly pressed together, and she was smiling as the boy dusted himself off with the help of his copies. Naruto-kun Gambit. She whispered, wishing desperately to have the strength to be as loud as Sakura or Ino. Niji was intrigued, but hardly impressed, while Tenten and Lee cheered the blonde on, and their sensei crowed about the power of youth. I need coffee, he thought, coffee and aspirin. In large quantities. Asuna Genin stared at the fight with impassive expressions, even as the one called Gaara felt a surge of something that for once he couldn't understand. Hero was gaping, his face giving him a comical expression that the other Jounin senseis found hilarious. Kagura was staring at the scene in both shock and something else she couldn't explain. So, the rumors were true, she thought, he has learned the Kage Bunshin, and he uses it well. She let her eyes seek out the blonde's face, and instinctively she focused on his eyes. Crystal blue just like her own. She quashed such thoughts as quickly as they began to surface. She had chosen to follow the clan, and that was what she would do. And the ice that had encased her heart grew just a touch more. Naruto grinned at Ryaika's shock. Man, you gotta love Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called over to her, shaking her from her stupor, makes for a great impact cushion. He rolled his aching shoulders. Still hurt like a bitch though, I gotta give you that. You are pretty good. Ryaika scowled. I don't need praise from an outcast like you. She spat, causing the blonde to narrow his eyes. I wasn't praising you, he replied, settling back into the first stance of the Igi style, I was just stating a fact. Still, I was trying to be nice, out of respect for you Gaonichan. If you don't want that, I don't. Ryaika shouted, rushing towards him with a surge of chakra to her legs, enhancing her speed. She leapt up, trying to come down on him with a vicious axe kick, only to be intercepted in mid-air with a powerful knee to her stomach. She howled as the air was forced from her body, stars filling her vision, as the blonde continued his assault with a mid-air twist and a powerful kick that caught her chin. The blow sent her flying backwards, where two of his clones were waiting. She focused through the pain, twisting to land on her feet, only to have them taken out from under her, as one clone dropped into a sweep, while the other performed a roundhouse kick that caught her across her chest. Ooh org. She cried out as she hit the ground. Naruto dispelled his clones, then surged his chakra so he could leap up. He flipped over, so his feet could anchor to the ceiling. He took his stance, and waited for the next go-around. Kakashi nodded as he watched the blonde's moves. Rough, unrefined, and with a lot of wasted motion, he said, causing the rookies to stare at him, as expected, since he never received proper training in the Igi branch of the Uzumaki Ryu. He's basically created his own variation of it to compensate. I nodded, remembering a time he had sparred against a member of the Uzumaki main house. Indeed, he muttered, you saw how the girl was trying to focus on Naruto's feet, she was hoping to spot the footwork the Igi style is famed for. Footwork? Kiba asked, what's that about? It is nothing you need concern yourself with, Inuzuka-san, the blue-haired lady answered before the other Jounin could explain, it is a clan secret. Mendasuke, Shikamaru muttered. Naruto frowned as he focused his chakra into his foot, his hips and legs tensing for the move he was about to attempt. If I get this wrong, my leg'll be shattered for sure, he thought, but I need to do this. I have to show them. Down on the floor Ryaika was struggling to stand. Her breath was ragged, and her vision was blurry from the heavy blows and lack of oxygen. Still, to her credit, she fought through the pain and turned her eyes up to spy the boy standing on the ceiling above. When she saw his stance, she froze. No way, she whispered, that stance. In the balconies above, Taro and Kagura were also shocked, though Kagura hit it far better. There's no way. Taro cried, I didn't even learn that till I was 10 and I've received instruction from the best. Kakashi and Asuma were both throwing at Naruto's position, while Kurenai was confused. Asuma, what's going on? She asked, what are they so concerned about? That stance signifies one of the Uzumaki Ryu's special techniques, Asuma explained, taking a puff from his cigarette before turning to the genin, watch closely, all of you, this is something you'd regret missing. Naruto ignored the comments as he crouched, then launched himself at the girl below him, crying out as he did so. For a moment, it seemed as if chakra was flickering about his legs, like flame, as he dropped towards his target. Ryuka acted on pure instinct as she twisted to the side, trying to avoid the almost subsonic blow. She was mostly successful, as the extended leg of her opponent did miss her body. Her pants, on the other hand, were not so fortunate. The material shredded from its brief contact with the descending appendage, and the rest was torn asunder from the air pressure change, even as she was launched away from the force of the impact. She spun through the air and landed hard on her side, exposing her bright red thong, shapely legs, and a curious blue spiral tattoo on her left cheek. Biba, Chaoji, and Kankuro all flew back from the sudden explosive nosebleeds caused by this event, while the remaining boys save Taro merely turned away to avoid the wrath of their Kunoichi teammates. Taro was glowering. "She's embarrassing us," he growled. When the dust cleared this time, it was clear that Naruto was going to be limping for a while. He was favoring his left leg as he made his way to the prone girl. He stared for a few moments as she forced herself back to her feet. "Give up," he said, forcing her to gape in surprise. "You can't beat me, and I don't want to hurt you. Besides, your clothes may not survive another round." Ryuka finally noticed her wardrobe malfunction and glowered at the blonde. "What, you don't want to embarrass me anymore?" She growled, "You embarrass the clan every day you live." Naruto's eyes widened at that, even as he growled. He shot forward, burying his right foot in her stomach again, forcing her to cough up some blood this time. He followed through with a twisting spin kick that caught her in the chest and hurled her towards the eastern wall. She cried out as she impacted hard against it, slumping down as her body gave out to the pain. Her eyes, tearing up from the agony, widened as the orange-clad boy stalked towards her. She closed her eyes, cringing as a breath of wind rushed over her. For several long moments, it seemed like nothing was going to happen, so she risked a peek, opening her eyes. She was shocked at what she saw. A new figure was standing between her and the outcast, acting almost like a shield between her and him. She recognized the blue hair and the familiar dark blue outfit, and she almost sobbed in relief. Naruto's eyes were hard, almost like diamond, as he stared at the new Kunoichi before him. His fists tightened so much that the nails dug into his palms, drawing a thin trickle of blood. Blue eyes, just like his own, stared back into his, and a voice he only barely recognized spoke. "That's enough, Ataudo," the girl said. "Stop." "Ataudo?" The genin in the stands all gasped. "Uzumaki Kana," Naruto whispered, his voice coarse and heavy with emotion. His glare didn't let up as he stared at the taller girl. "I guess I shouldn't be surprised. It's been a long time," she muttered, trying to get a feel for what the obviously angry boy would do. Naruto shrugged. "I wouldn't know," he replied. "I've lived without a family for most of my life, so I don't really have a comparison." He turned to Hayate. "Hayate-senpai, this counts as interference, right?" The sickly Jounin nodded. "Yuzuki Ryuka is cough disqualified," he muttered. "Shasha, cough Uzumaki Naruto." Naruto nodded, then unzipped his jacket before tossing it to the half-naked girl behind Kana. Both girls stared at him in shock, and he shrugged. "I like looking at girls just like any other guy," he explained, "but only if the girl wants me to look at her. I ruined her pants, so I'll make up for it." He looked at Ryuka, who was staring at him in shock and a small part of gratitude. "Go ahead and keep the jacket. I'm sure I can find another." With that, he walked back up the stairs. Anna watched him go, before helping the shocked Ryuka to her feet and leading her from the arena. And the computer began to cycle names once more. Sarutobi made a motion with his hand, signaling Anko to pause the selection process for the next round. The screen shut down, and the elderly Cage took a puff on his pipe. "I think we could all do with a short break," he announced to the confused participants. "The next round will commence in 20 minutes. Use this short break well." He turned and walked out a side door, Anko and Hayate following behind him. Naruto winced as his leg gave a spasm, reminding him of the damage he had just inflicted upon himself when he botched the sword skill. He pulled up the leg of his tracksuit, frowning at the swelling around his ankle, as well as the ugly-looking bruise that was starting to form. Kakashi noticed the sight and frowned. It seems that even the recuperative powers of the Kyuubi have limits, he thought. Still, if it were any other genin, I'm certain that his leg would have shattered completely from that move. Standing off to the side and watching as well, Kagura also frowned as she watched her son gingerly rub his wounded leg. While a small part of her was concerned over how the injury was affecting the boy, the part of her that had followed the clan for so long, the part that left him behind, was more concerned with how he had learned a move on his own, no less, that most main house members couldn't learn without extensive help. Ryuga would not have been able to teach him that, she thought. She would not have been privy to the Igi techniques as in Yuzuki. Ibisu said that he never interacted with the boy until earlier this year. Where did you learn that move? She frowned again as she saw the small Hyuga girl walk up to him, holding a small container in her hand. What is this? Inosuke stared at the wall of the infirmary, his mind replaying his last match over and over again. That Sunanin was right, he thought, as he recalled his own words towards the end, I was foolish, I will not advance with this exam. The door room opened, and his eyes widened as Kana led Ryuka into the room, the latter wearing the outcast's hideous orange jacket around her waist. The garment fell to just above her knees, leaving the rest of her legs bare. What happened? He asked, his voice weakened from the horrible cure the puppeteer had provided. I fought him, Ryuka whispered, even as Kana sat her down in a chair, he eyed was. Ryuka-chan lost, Kenasu-kun, Kana interrupted, stopping the shaken girl's stuttering, my brother will advance to the finals. Kenasu could hardly believe his ears. Ryuka-san lost. He parroted, but how? How could the outcast defeat her? Not even Taro-san can match Ryuka in Taijutsu. The blue-haired girl merely shook her head. He's been practicing since we left him here, she replied, he performed Igi Ryu. Sword. Kenasu actually gaped at that. How could Ibisu-san have? No, Kana interrupted, Ibisu was never able to master sword, let alone rapier or even boomerang. No, Naruto, given the roughness of his technique and footwork, it's safe to say that he came up with the technique himself. Ryuka was mumbling something, causing the two to stare at her. Holding he could why. She kept muttering. What's wrong with her? The sword prodigy asked. Anna sighed, her blue eyes seeming to darken in thought. I think she realizes that my brother was holding back, she replied. At the white-haired boy's look, she clarified, you've heard the reports of him outwitting Anbu and elite jounins before. If he can do that, even when he's only doing it as part of a joke, what do you think he can do when he's serious? The Kenjutsu specialist nodded, bowing his head. He could have killed her. The pair turned to look at the shaken girl, who now had 2 tracks of tears running down her cheeks. Stay with her, Kenasuke, the blue-haired Chunin ordered, I'll head back to the room and get her a new pair of pants. With that, she stepped out. Kenasuke frowned as he watched his cousin's tears flow. What does this mean for us now? He wondered. Ryuka's tears continued to fall. Oh no, Naruto-kun. The blue-haired Hyuga era spoke, causing the blonde to look up. Hey, Hinata, he grunted, wincing at the spike of pain caused by his sudden shift, what's up? Oh no, I want you to have this. She mumbled in a rush, thrusting the small brown container towards the kneeling boy. Huh? He muttered intelligently, what's that, Hinata? It's a medicinal cream, Kurenai replied, Hinata's very talented at making her own medicines, Naruto. More than once her salves have really helped our team out. Really? He replied, picking up the container tentatively, it's that good huh? Hell yeah it is, you dope, Kiba replied, me and Akamaru get some nasty cuts and scrapes all the time when training. Hinata's stuff is like a dream. Kurenai-sensei K Kiba-kun, the pale-eyed girl mumbled, embarrassed by the high praise. Wow. Naruto muttered, opening the lid. He took a brief sniff of the cream contained inside it. Cool, it smells like mint. I like mint. If it were possible, Hinata would have blushed even harder. After all, mint was her favorite type of body wash as well. Naruto applied the cool medicine to his aching ankle, hissing a little at the sudden cold, but sighing happily as it started to soothe the bruised tissues and relieve the pain. Sakura, Hinata, and the other genin watched as the swelling began to visibly go down, and the 5 jounin senseis also watched, with more concern in Kagura's case than she would be willing to admit. Wow. Naruto shouted, this stuff is awesome. It works so fast. He looked at the blushing Hyuga girl. Hinata, you're amazing. This stuff rocks. The poor girl almost swooned at the compliment, even as the other genin watched in surprise at how fast Naruto's injury seemed to heal. It's too bad Hinata can't really take all the credit for that, Kakashi thought, as Naruto offered some of the cream to Sakura, Sasuke, and the others, while extolling Hinata's virtues as an apothecary. Well, her cream certainly does help, it's mostly the influence of the Kyuubi. Though, come to think of it, Arashi-sensei also healed pretty fast too. The silver-haired man's thoughts were interrupted when the Hokage re-entered the arena, Anko and Hade at his heels. The sickly jounin made a motion towards the screen, and the next round was decided. Arrow found the next few matches to be boring in his opinion. It had started with a catfight between the pink-haired girl on the Outcasts team and the blonde-haired banshee near him. He had to force himself not to laugh as he watched their skills down being displayed, or rather, their lack of skills. In the end, it came down to the outcast shouting encouragement to his teammate, a botched shintensen from the Yamanaka girl, and a double haymaker knockout that ended the fight in a draw. The whole thing took nearly 20 minutes, and the dark-haired Uzumaki heir considered them the biggest waste of his life, ever. The next fight featured the Rot-un boy from the Yamanaka's team, Akamichi something, and the girl in the pink tang from the male Hyuga's team. It ended rather amusingly, as the round boy used his meat tank technique to deflect many of the girl's thrown weapons, only to wind up pinned to the wall after he was forced to release the jutsu by the girl's use of chakra strings. The girl, Tenten, advanced to the next round. If the second match was amusing, the fourth was simply horrifying. The red-haired boy from Suna, the last of their genin to compete, decimated the remaining member of the Dropouts team. It was all everybody, even the Jounins, could do not to throw up when the sands crushed the boy, severing one of his elongated arms from the rest of the body. It flopped on the ground like a wet noodle, twitching for a few moments before finally going still. The third match was between the boy with the horrendous bowl cut and green outfit and the Inyazuka boy. It was actually more intense than anybody had guessed it would be. Even if it ended oddly. In the beginning, it seemed as if the bowl cut would thoroughly own the Inyazuka, as his taijutsu was far above the wild genin's own style. Even the boy's use of the Shikaku no Jutsu, four legs technique, couldn't seem to even the odds. When the boy had tossed a puppy a Hyrigan, soldier pill, things became interesting. A quick Juijin Bunshin, man-beast clone, and it fast became a 2-on-1 match. It seemed clear that, while the boy, Lee, was a genius at hand-to-hand combat, the wild, yet synchronous motions of the two had him confused. Indeed, the match seemed over when the boy hit him with the famed drilling fang technique of his clan, the Gatsuga. Then the green-clad genin dropped his weights. Taro was sure that it had to be some kind of genjutsu. It seemed absolutely impossible that any boy, especially one that from what he overheard the pink-haired girl and the strange man with the giant eyebrows say couldn't use his chakra properly to carry such insane amounts of weight. The match seemed over, yet again, when the boy hit the Inyazuka with the Amit Range technique, even if it was obvious that he was holding back on the force of the blow. Indeed, it seemed done, but the green-clad boy made one mistake. He forgot about the dog. The blow from behind by the hinged canine partner knocked the boy for a loop, his limbs flailing as he tumbled to the ground. The dog was caught on the side of its head by a flailing arm, also rendering it unconscious. Yet another draw. That was different, the boy's Hyuga teammate muttered, getting nods all around. Their sensei, a man with even more obscene eyebrows, was sniffling at the unfairness of it all. "Oh, my precious student. How cruel to your power of youth. We'll just have to double your training again," he cried, a setting sunset appearing behind him. Taro would have been impressed with the genjutsu if he wasn't so disturbed by the eyebrows. After the horror of the Suninins match and the sheer action and suspense of the Inyazuka bowl cut match, it was almost a relief to see some humor in the match, featuring the remaining Odo Nin and the Nara boy from the Yamanaka team. Taro had to give the Nara credit, having the guy knock himself out by bending over backwards into a wall was genius. He's someone to watch, Taro thought as the machine began to cycle through names again, he used his head and planned his move perfectly. That boy is more than he lets on. "Taro," Kagura spoke, interrupting his thoughts. "Yes, sensei?" he asked. When she pointed towards the screen and he saw the names displayed he grinned. Uzumaki Taro vs Hyuga Hinata. Hinata stared at the screen with some slight apprehension. She wasn't nervous about fighting the Uzumaki boy. Given his behavior towards Naruto-kun, as well as his apparent disdain towards the rest of the genin present, she was actually looking forward to putting the jerk in his place. What she was nervous about was how Naruto would take it. It was no secret to the rookies that Naruto wanted to become Hokage. Indeed, if there was a person in the village who didn't know about the blonde boy's dream, they were likely a visitor or deaf. What was a secret to others at least, was Naruto's other dream. It was one she discovered several years ago. One that became part of the reason she admired him so much. He dreamed of family. She had watched Naruto stare after other kids as they were picked up and dropped off from the academy by their parents and siblings, and she had seen the longing in his eyes. The pain and loneliness had echoed her own in a way. She knew her father loved her, even if he seemed to not care. The Hyuga clan was very family-oriented, it was impossible not to love each and every member, be they main house or branch house. Even Neji, with his resentment towards the main family, loved her and Hanabi. When she had learned of Naruto's abandonment by his own clan, she had nearly gone into a rage herself. She had seen the anger in Naruto's eyes as he was confronted by his sister during his bout. While the others had thought that he was apathetic towards her, Hinata and Neji, she was certain, had seen the pain in his beautiful blue eyes. He wanted his sister back. She began to make her way towards the stairs leading into the arena when Naruto spoke up, jarring her from her thoughts. "Hinata-chan," he spoke, causing her heart to leap just a bit with the chan suffix, "don't hold back on him." "Indeed, Hinata-sama," Neji spoke up, shocking her, "the Uzumaki clan and the Hyuga clan have had some bad blood between them for several generations. He will not hesitate to genuinely harm you, do not give him that chance." "Neji Nison," she whispered. "I know my destiny," he continued, "I also know yours, Lady Hinata. You may lose this fight, but I know you will still give a good showing. I can sense you have improved, now show us all how much." Naruto smiled. "Kick his ass, Dadabeo." Hinata firmed up her resolve and smiled at her longtime crush. "For Naruto-kun, I will be strong." She thought, I will show his clan that they were fools for leaving him alone. She descended into the arena. "8-match cough cough," Hate muttered, as the two genin faced off in the ring, Hyuga Hinata cough versus Uzumaki cough cough cough, Taro Hajime. I don't know what's worse, Taro spoke, glaring at the girl, the fact the outcast is advancing or that he has a fangirl like you. Nani Hinata gasped, glaring at the boy. It's bad enough he embarrasses the clan by living, he replied, but that he has the attentions of a Hyuga. It's mind-boggling. He set his left leg back and raised his arms up into the traditional Agi stance. I guess I'll just have to educate you on the facts of life, girl. Hinata frowned before sliding into the first form stance of the Jaiken Taijutsu style her family was famed for. You abandoned him, leaving him to suffer, she whispered, though her voice carried throughout the arena. His pain, I have seen it many times, yet he never gives up. He takes on every challenge, and though he stumbles and falls a lot he always gets back up. Her Kekai Genkai, the Byakugan, activated for the first time with her own willpower, rather than the traditional seal sequence she was accustomed to using. You will lose here, Uzumaki Taro. Taro grunted. If that's the way you want it, he sighed, before hurling his leg forward, an arc of chakra surging from his outstretched foot, shooting towards the shocked girl. He cried out a word as the chakra surged forward. Rapier. Hinata spun on the balls of her feet, just barely avoiding the deadly surge of energy. It snagged a portion of her jacket, tearing it away to reveal the black shirt she wore underneath. If I have to beat you by tearing you apart piece by piece, so be it. Taro shouted, running towards the girl. He began shifting from right to left in a seemingly random pattern, and suddenly he was within Hinata's guard, catching her with a vicious front thrust kick that flashed with chakra as well. Blade. He cried as the girl was hurled backwards with a cry. Argghh. She screamed as she landed, sliding back a few feet. She spat some blood from her mouth, turning her gaze to the smirking genin. You can't hit what you can't follow, can you, Hyuga? He mocked, the all-powerful Byakugan, one of the two prized Taijutsu of Konohagakure. I'd always wanted to fight someone with those eyes. Now, here we are and I find myself disappointed. He frowned at her. I take it back. You are perfect for the outcast, a weakling for a walking shame. It's a match made by the gods. Hinata forced herself to her feet, even as she wondered about how to combat Taro's techniques. Hinata-chan. Came the voice of her crush. Both combatants turned to see Naruto glaring at the dark-haired boy. You are not weak. Only a real weakling needs to insult his opponents. You stay out of this, outcast. Taro growled out, I'll settle you later. Hinata, watch his feet. Naruto shouted out, don't follow the eyes. Follow the footwork. Hinata's head snapped up as she recalled Kakashi-sensei and Asuma-sensei mentioning something about that. Her Byakugan reactivated and she turned to her opponent. I care nothing for your words, she muttered, let your skills talk for you, and mine shall do the same. The last part came out almost like a snarl. Taro frowned. Fine then, this next technique will finish you off, he muttered, before louching forward in the same zigzag motion as before. This time, just before he got inside the Hyuga heiress's guard, he leapt, twisting his body sideways and hooking his left foot behind her neck. Hinata surged into motion with a quick strike to his leg, using Jaiken to disable the chakra flow, and another display of her flexibility with a sideways bend, avoiding the scissoring kick that would have likely decapitated her. With Taro off balance, she struck quickly, disabling his right arm with a two-fingered Jaiken strike to area just above his elbow. While she couldn't see the Tenketsu like her father could, the pressure point chart she studied constantly at home did give her a reference point, and she wanted to use all of that knowledge right now. Erg. Taro screamed as his arm felt like it was enveloped in fire. He laughed, his right hand forward, instinctively rotating his chakra in a particular fashion as he cried out a name. Heiken. The shift in the air pressure between the two blew them apart from each other, further shredding Hinata's jacket as well as part of her shirt. The ruined jacket fell to the floor, leaving Hinata clad in her black caprice and black shirt, which was now torn just below her dot. Sakura and Ino grumbled slightly, making noises about being ill-equipped, much to Naruto's confusion. Taro forced himself to his feet, glaring at the girl, who tried to cover herself. Okay, he grinned, I see you do have some skill. He took a moment to leer at the girl. Obviously the true Hyuga clan Kekai Genkai is in full force with you. Nice chakra reserves. Hinata frowned at his innuendos. She had always been shy about her body, even her own sister had never seen her unclothed. It was a privilege she wanted only one person to have. Taro could still move his hand, so he quickly ran through a seal sequence, ending on Ryu. Let's see how you handle this. He shouted. Fuiten. Furyu no Jutsu. A rush of air, vaguely resembling a dragon, surged forward, striking the shocked girl, hurling her into a wall and shredding her shirt completely, leaving her torso bare. Her caprice also developed tears, nearly shredding off her as well. You were good to evade my boomerang, Taro muttered, walking up to the prone girl and delivering a swift kick to her stomach, but you're still weak. He placed his foot on top of her left, pressing down and causing the broken girl to whimper. The Hyuga will always be inferior to the Uzumaki. You would bow to our outcast. That just proves it. Enough. The sickly Jounin Heiichi shouted, appearing between the boy and Hinata, separating them. Shaosha, Uzumaki Taro. You won, now back off. Kurenai shunshined into the ring as Naruto, Shino, and Sakura followed. Naruto was already whipping off his black undershirt, using it to cover the groaning Hinata. You went too far, he growled as the others helped Hinata to her feet so she could also glare at the boy. There is no such thing as too far in combat, outcast, Taro replied, and ninja fights to win. Konosuke may not have understood that, but I certainly do. Taro, that is enough, Kagura muttered, appearing behind him, returned to the gangway. Hold it, Taro, Naruto growled as the pair turned to walk away. They looked at him as he bent down, running his hand through some of Hinata's spilt blood. He made a fist and pointed it at the boy, whose eyebrow had arsed up in curiosity. When we face off, I am going to break you. Kurenai lead the shaken form of Hinata out of the arena, her arms draped protectively around her student. Naruto watched them leave, his demeanor tense as he moved towards the stairs. Naruto-kun, you may remain down here, Sarutobi called, his own brown eyes glaring at the smug form of Uzumaki Taro, who had merely smirked at the blonde Jinchuriki's declaration. The preliminaries are over, so it's time to explain the final test. Naruto nodded, walking forward as the rest of the remaining genin assembled. Sasuke stood next to him, frowning at his cousin. I think I'm beginning to understand why you don't like them, dope, the Uchiha boy muttered as the Hokage and the three proctors walked forward. Naruto merely grunted in response. Now that we have narrowed the field down, Sarutobi spoke up, catching the attention of the 10 remaining Chunin hopefuls, your final exam will be just like this one. At their confusion, the aged leader smiled. Simply put, the final exam is a tournament in front of the entire village, as well as the Fire Lord, other visiting dignitaries, as well as the Kazuki-age and myself. He motioned to Anko, who walked forward carrying a box. Now, Anko-sen will have you draw a number from this box. This will allow us to determine which match you're going to fight in, she smirked, sorry, but there's no trading of numbers and no repicks. You get what you get. She stopped in front of Naruto. Since you seem so eager, Gaki, she chuckled, even as he gave her a dark look, why don't you draw first? The orange-clad boy nodded, reaching into the box and shuffling the papers inside around a few times before pulling a slip from the container. Anko nodded, proceeded down the line. Hey, Hokage-sama. Shikamaru spoke up after he had drawn his lot, you said this is going to be a tournament, right? That means there can only be one winner at the end. Correct, Shikamaru-kun, Sarutobi replied. Does that mean only one of us can become Chunin? He asked. Not a cough all, Heiichi spoke up as Anko finished the number drawing, we gauge your potential cough throughout the exam. Your performance cough will determine if you advance. Heiichi is correct, Sarutobi continued, indeed, even those who were eliminated here today could be promoted and conversely, even those who advance here today could be denied promotion. The blonde Sunin Tamari frowned. I better get promoted after all this, she thought, my father's plans be boogered, I've earned the right. Sarutobi nodded to Ibiki, who walked forward with a clipboard. Now, kids, he grumbled, tell me which number you drew and I'll show you which match you'll have. His scarred face twisted into a grotesque grin, startling some of the remaining hopefuls. I got one, Naruto muttered. 4, Sasuke continued. 5, Tamari grumbled. 6, Shino replied. 3, Gaara whispered. 2, Taro yawned. 10, Kankuro smirked. 8, Shikamaru said. 9, Niji frowned. 7, Tenten questioned. Ibiki nodded, jotting the information down on the paper. Good, he growled out, now, here are your matches for the Chunin exam finals. He turned the clipboard towards them, showing off the elimination-style matches. Naruto grinned when he saw the arrangement. Uzumaki Naruto vs Uzumaki Taro, Uchiha Sasuke vs Sabaku no Gaara, Sabaku no Tamari vs Abiram Shino, Inkawa Tenten vs Nara Shikamaru, Hyuga Niji vs Sabaku no Kankuro. Taro right off the bat, huh? The blonde boy thought gleefully, I couldn't have asked for more. Now, I must inform you that the exam will not be held immediately, Sarutobi spoke, jarring Naruto from his thoughts, the finals will take place 1 month from now. As you have seen, much was revealed during this preliminary. While the main purpose of this break is to allow the dignitaries time to arrive, it also serves as a time of training and recuperation for you all. Use it wisely. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other, nodding, before rushing up to Sakura and Kakashi. The silver-haired Jounin sighed. Naruto will need training in order to combat Taro, he thought, but Sasuke's opponent with the curse mark to contend with, he needs extra attention. He frowned beneath his mask. Damn it, how can I solve this? Kakashi-sensei? Sakura asked, as her teammates made their way towards them, Sasuke-kun and Naruto too, how can we help them? The masked genin stared at his pink-haired pupil. That Taro guy he needs to go down. Naruto will need help but Sasuke-kun's opponent. I know, he replied. The pink-haired girl sighed. The situation didn't seem good. Jiraiya smirked as his sensei eased himself into his chair. Looks like that lumbago is catching up to you, old man, the white-haired sage chuckled. I told you should get more vitamins in your diet. Sarutobi gave his former pupil a withering look. Now is not the time for your advice, Jiraiya, he gritted, we both know why I called you here. I heard about the Uchiha boy's mark from Enko, the Sannin replied, a double-layered containment seal should be enough to contain it. If the boy could get back up after such a severe trauma, he's got some strength of will. Strength of will or desire for revenge? Sarutobi replied, his desire to be strong for himself is guided mostly because of what Itachi did. Power is what he wants, and people will often sacrifice that they would least want to for lesser things. The Toad Sage frowned. I don't think another seal will really help at this point, he answered, the best that can be done is to give him the training needed to match Itachi. Well, I wouldn't normally recommend it, Anbu training would do the trick. Sarutobi frowned. I'd prefer to avoid that option, he muttered, I won't have another child, even if he or she is a full-fledged ninja, go through that hellish training ever again. Danzo can gripe all he wants, I won't turn children into weapons. Ichunin stuck his head in the door, getting the occupant's attention. Hokage-sama, he greeted, Jiraiya-sama. Haddock-san and his genin team are here to speak with you. Sarutobi smiled. Well, I think I may have another task for you then, Jiraiya, he chuckled, send them in, Izuru. Ichunin nodded, and the quartet of Team 7 entered the room. Boy, Gigi. We gotta talk. Naruto called out, earning a bop on the head from Sakura. Naruto. Show him respect. She growled. Heh, Gigi, I love it. Her inner self chuckled. Ma, calm down you two, the cycloptic Jounin muttered, waving his hands. We came here for a reason. HMMPH, Sasuke grunted, mildly amused by his teammates' actions. I'm guessing it has to do with the matchups, the Hokage questioned. At the trio's nod, he sighed. The matches can't be changed, unfortunately. I don't want them changed. Naruto growled out, I want Taro. He needs to pay for what he did to Hinata. Sakura nodded, her face set into a scowl. What he did was insulting to Okinoichi, she spoke up, it took all Ino, and I had not to castrate him right then and there. Sasuke frowned. What was his problem, anyway? He muttered, he went after Hinata like it was a personal grudge or something. Strangely enough, it was Jiraiya who replied. In a way it was, he said, the Uzumaki clan and the Hyuga clan have been enemies for generations. The white-haired sage turned to Naruto. I'm surprised you have a problem with it, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto growled. And why's that, ugly? He replied. Jiraiya was about to respond when Sarutobi interrupted. Jiraiya, you don't know, do you? He asked. Naruto shot a glare at the white-haired ninja, well said. Nin turned to the seated cage. Know what, sensei? He asked, he should know about the grudge. Kagura would have taught him all about it. Everyone stiffened as a surge and killer intent filled the room. Jiraiya shot a glance at the blonde, frowning as he saw the boy struggling with his chakra. Naruto, calm down, Kakashi muttered, putting a comforting hand on the blonde's shoulder. Sakura glared at the white-haired man. You're Jiraiya of the Densetsu no Sannin, aren't you? She asked. At the man's nod, she continued, shouldn't you know almost everything that goes on in this village? You must have heard about Naruto being left behind 8 years ago. Jiraiya's jaw dropped. What did you say, young lady? He asked, his voice deadly quiet. They abandoned me, Naruto spoke up, even as Kakashi and Sasuke both tried to calm him down, the entire clan took off to the capital, leaving me here to rot. I'm basically a Ronin, I don't have a clan. Jiraiya felt his heart break a small bit at the bitter acceptance in the boy's tone. At the same time, he couldn't seem to wrap his mind around the idea that Kagura would abandon her child. He turned a glare to Sarutobi. Why wasn't I told, old man? He muttered. You are still technically a member of the Azuki branch of the Uzumaki clan, Jiraiya, Sarutobi replied, I can't bypass clan laws, and the laws state that only the Uzumaki can inform the Azuki of such news. My powers as Hokage, despite being the military leader of our country, do not extend into the civilian realm. If they did, I would have abolished the caged bird seal on the branch house of the Hyuga. The Toad Sannin frowned again, before turning to Kakashi. I needed to see the boy anyway, he thought, maybe this will work out after all. Kakashi, what did you come here for to start with, anyway? He asked. We know something is off about Sabaku no Gaara, he replied, Sasuke needs special training to properly handle this match, but I don't want to abandon my other 2 students. Sakura might not be going into the finals, but she needs training nevertheless, and Naruto is going up against Uzumaki Taro. Jiraiya smirked. That arrogant little twerp. He muttered. He may be arrogant, but he has the skills to back them up, Sakura growled, those moves he used. Uzumaki Ryuka Sappo, Jiraiya muttered, it's traditionally split into 2 branches, Hyogi, or open skills, and Igi, or shadow skills. It was developed a few generations back to combat the Hyuga Jaikin. They were pissed when we basically made one of their techniques our own. Sasuke grunted. That Haken punch, he muttered, he used it to counter Hinata-san's offensive and to rip her clothes off. Jiraiya frowned. What did he do? Naruto growled. He insulted her, shredded her clothes, he replied, then, after kicking her while she was down, he put his foot on her chest. Jiraiya spat on the floor. That punk, he said, the anger in his voice obvious, for a clan heir, he certainly doesn't get the political hornet's nest he just stirred up. He shook his head. Anyway, back to the what you needed, Kakashi. The Jounin grunted. For your Kunoichi here? Send her to Anko or Yugao-chan, the Sannin ordered, better yet, both. Yugao for Jinjutsu and Taijutsu, and Anko for weapons and special training. Sakura did not like the sound of special training. She especially didn't like the idea of her trainer being a woman who scared even Naruto. Boy, Sakura-chan, don't worry, Naruto smiled, even if that creepy examiner lady is there, Yugao-nichan is really cool. You'll get super strong with her. That was enough to firm the pink-haired girl's resolve. Okay, she replied. Kakashi smiled. Maybe Anko-chan can teach her about those special poisons she has, he thought, barely keeping the giggle inside. Now, Kakashi, Jiraiya continued, what were you planning on teaching the Uchiha here? Sasuke did not like being discussed like he was an object. Well, speed for sure, Kakashi replied, his Sharingan needs some fine-tuning as well. As for how to beat that Gaara kid? Well, there's probably only one way. Jiraiya frowned. The Chidori. At Kakashi's nod, he sighed, then turned to Sasuke. Alright punk, he grumbled, while Sasuke growled at the insult, listen up. Kakashi is going to teach you a jutsu that by all rights no genin should ever learn. It's powerful, and given what my old teammate put on your neck, exactly the kind of thing he'd want you to learn. Sasuke's arm shot up to his shoulder. Yeah, Orochimaru would love for you to learn that, the Sannin continued, so listen up. Even if you learn that jutsu, you won't be a match for Itachi. Who's Itachi? Sakura and Naruto both wondered, while Sasuke growled. You need a few more years before you can hope to match him, the sage went on, especially if the rumors I've been hearing are true, but that's for another time. Naruto was hopping up and down, partially in anger and partially in nervousness. So what about me, then? He asked, I need training too. That's where I'll come in, the white-haired man grinned, Yuzuki Jiraiya, member of the Sannin, and your new sensei. If there was one place that Hinata could honestly say she hated, it was this room. If there was one group of people she could honestly hate it would be this group. The Hyuga Council of Elders stared at her from their raised dais in the central hall of the clan complex. The group of four main house members and one branch looked at her with impassive eyes. Hinata knew what they truly thought though. Explain to us, please, Hinata-sama, the branch house member, Ikaru, muttered, why was it that you lost to the Uzumaki heir? Hinata barely kept her face neutral at the callous question. Though the medical corps had treated the bruise, she could still feel the phantom ache in her dot. It was one thing to be humiliated by having her clothes destroyed in public. The academy courses on Kunoichi combat had somewhat prepared her for it, even if it was a jarring experience. Having had his foot pressing down on her was both painful and degrading. I see can offer no excuse, Ikaru-san, she muttered, keeping her eyes on the floor. Off to the side of the room, her sister Hanabi stood with her father. Hinata wondered if her sibling understood just how angry the elders were and if she was enjoying the thought of her elder sister getting punished. There is hardly a need for excuses, Ikaru-san, the only woman on in the group spoke. I read the report from her Jounin sensei, and it appears that the boy simply had her beat on Taijutsu. We all know what the Uzumaki Ryu is capable of. Be that as it may, Shiori-sama, Ikaru replied, Hinata-sama is the clan heiress. How can the village respect us if our own heiress is stripped and beaten by another clan heir? How could the Fire Lord respect us? Hyuga Shiori was a hardened woman. She had been a part of Sarutobi's genin class and was hailed, in her prime, as a Taijutsu mistress of supreme caliber, as well as possessing a level of chakra control that most medic nins would kill for. It was said that she even tutored the Sannin Tsunade on both control and Taijutsu. The elderly woman had seen much and she had played the political game longer than most. She knew exactly what Ikaru was trying to do. I think that we could turn this to our advantage, she replied, well the Uzumaki are the bodyguards for the daimyo, they have to show a certain level of decorum. Even to their enemies. Hinata frowned as she listened to the woman's words. She wants something, the blue-haired girl wondered, but what? Uzumaki Tero's actions show a remarkable lack of maturity, she continued, well his skills are likely without question, his choice to embarrass Hinata-chan here has given us a chance to make them all pay. I'm curious as to how that could be accomplished, Shiori-san, another of the elders asked. Hinata-chan, do you recall the technique used by the Uzumaki boy when he shredded your jacket? The white-haired woman asked. Why yes, Shiori-sama, she muttered, it seemed like an ordinary punch, but it acted like a vacuum, first pulling forward, then shoving you away, her father spoke up, finally walking forward. Her sister followed, and the pair knelt next to her, both touching their heads to the floor. Why yes, that is correct, she stuttered, surprised that he would actually speak to her in such a setting. The Heiken technique, Ikaru spat, shocking the two children with his vulgar display, a blatant thumb to our eyes. Ikaru-sama? Hinata asked. The Heiken is a copy, in a sense, of one of our style's more advanced techniques, another elder spoke. The original technique, the Haki Kusho, is still considered to be the more elegant version, but the Uzumaki clan has it beaten in raw power. Hinata-chan, how did you feel about the Uzumaki boy's words? Shiori continued, you are a member of the strongest clan in Konoha. Did his words strike you? Did they burn in your ears? Hinata frowned, then raised her head to gaze directly into the matron's eyes. I hated them, she whispered, I have always tried to see the good in people. Her thoughts drifted to Naruto, how he had given up his jacket to cover the Izuki girl's body, and how he had given his own shirt to cover her embarrassment. I saw no goodness in Uzumaki Taro. He is a monster. Ikaru nodded. Like his whole clan, an arrogant waste of. You are wrong, Ikaru-sama, Hinata interrupted. If anyone was more startled at the shy girl's interruption, it would have been her own father. Hinata, he wondered, inwardly gaping at the girl, while his face remained neutral. Wrong? Ikaru stuttered, what do you mean, Hinata-sama? You yourself said that the other members of his team were arrogant and malicious. I was not talking about them either, Ikaru-sama, the girl interrupted again, this time earning obvious looks of surprise from the elders. Big sister is different now, was the only thought the young Hanabi could materialize. If not them, then whom were you speaking of, Hinata-chan? Shiori asked. She already had a fairly good idea and she found herself liking the possibilities it presented. Uzumaki Naruto, she small girl replied. That little Ikaru stuttered, only to stop himself as Shiori's hand appeared near his heart, a faint blue glow of chakra outlining her fingertips. Keep your tone, Ikaru-kun, the elderly woman muttered, and remember the law. Hinata snapped her eyes to the old woman. Law, what law? She wondered. It was not the first time she had heard of something regarding a law around Naruto, and now it seemed very important. He has always been kind, she replied, I have watched him for a long time. He has suffered, but he never gives up. She took a deep breath to calm her nerves again. Talking to the elders like this was exhausting, for some reason. His PR pranks are not malicious, and he's very hardworking. The Ashi found himself nodding. Well, he had never had any true personal contact with the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, he had seen the boy practicing on his own many times. The boy was a ruffian, and his skills were questionable at best, completely ridiculous at worst, but his drive to succeed had no equal. The Hyuga leader actually admired that in the boy. And now I see, he thought, staring at his eldest child, that is something you admire in him too, isn't it, Hinata? For the longest time I wanted to be like him, the girl kept on, shocking the male elders and her sister, while Shiori and Hiashi looked on. He has strength, not just of the body but of the heart. He stumbles, and he falls, but he always gets up again. Big sister Hanabi whispered, staring at the girl with something akin to awe. Now I see that he has done all this, even though his clan abandoned him. Hinata actually growled at this, earning a small squeak from Hanabi. We are a divided house, because of that horrible mark that rests on your brow, Ikaru-sama. The branch elder frowned, his hand instinctively moving to his covered forehead. But no matter what, we do not abandon our own, Hinata continued, we may not act like it, but I know that we all love each member of this clan. We all want to be a real family again. Shiori saw the unshed tears in the girl's eyes. You just may be the one, she thought, I wonder if you could handle the training. I miss Niji Nison, the girl muttered, I want my brother back. I don't want to be a weakling anymore. You want Uzumaki Naruto, Shiori interrupted, shocking everyone and earning a squeak and a flushed face from the clan heiress. The old woman smiled. I too have seen him in the streets, Hinata-chan. I can't say as I understand the attraction, she grinned as the girl squeaked again, but I can see that he has inspired you. Hiashi looked at his daughter. You would have gone to seek training, but not from us, wouldn't have you? He asked, you were afraid we would toss you aside. Hinata's lips trembled and she turned a hot gaze to her father. But you did toss me aside. She whispered, her voice too choked up to shout, I was there. I heard what you said to Kurenai-sensei. Hiashi frowned. He had been frustrated that day after a rather disappointing sparring session between his two daughters. What did I do to you, Hinata? He wondered. I know I'm not very good at Jaiken, the small girl continued, firming her voice and holding back the tears. Niji Nison is far better than I will ever be, and Hanabi-chan has the potential to surpass him. Everyone was shocked at her open admittance of her shortcoming, and her sister frowned. But you never fight me seriously, big sister. The 7-year-old spoke up. Hinata bowed her head. I can't, she replied. Hiashi frowned. Why not, Hinata? He asked, the elders all wondering the same thing. You have the potential to become good in the style, yet you refuse to use it against an opponent. I do not hesitate against enemies, Hinata replied, but against her. She pointed at the darker-haired girl. Tell me you don't see it, father. Tell me you can't see her face. Shiori nodded. The resemblance, she muttered. If it were possible for wide eyes to light up in understanding, Hiashi's would have glowed like the sun at that moment. Resemblance? Hanabi asked, earning a quiet chuckle from two of the elders. How cute, Shiori grinned. I see, Hiashi muttered, you won't fight her because of how much she looks like Shikuko. Hanabi looked over as Hinata nodded. Her sister looked at her and said something she'd never forget. I couldn't possibly hurt you, Hanabi-chan, she said, you look so much like our mother it just doesn't feel right. A smaller Hyuga girl had never known her mother, Hinata's birth had been difficult and Hanabi's had been fatal. She had desperately wanted to know the woman who had brought her into the world, but no one would speak to her. I look like mama? She whispered. Very much so, Hiashi spoke, your mother had the same hair as Hinata, but face-wise. You are the exacting image of her. Hanabi felt tears brewing in her eyes and she tried to keep them at bay. She was denied the chance, however, when Hinata wrapped her arms around her. Hinata-chan is right, Shiori muttered, as the two girls comforted each other, for too long this clan has been torn in two. We lost Hisashi because of this mess. I lost my daughter to the seal. We need to change. How? Hikaru asked. We start with Hinata, she replied, and we finish with Uzumaki Naruto. The other three elders nodded and the older woman stood up. Hyuga Hinata, she spoke, getting the sniffling girl's attention, I am personally going to train you for the next few weeks. You are going to become strong enough to even win Naruto-san's attention. Shiori-sama Hinata stuttered. And the first thing we're going to do, the Hyuga matron frowned, is get rid of that damn stutter. She wasn't sure what he wanted to speak with her about, but Kin knew better than not to answer even in the hospital when Orochimaru called her. It was a complex jutsu, but one that all shinobi of Itagakure were required to learn. Her hands moved quickly into the seal sequence, her chakra flowing as the seals molded it. Inu, Seru, Ryu, Tori, Hibi, Tora, Hibi. Ninpu. Inkaku Odo, Hitoshirezu Dengen. 1. The jutsu worked two ways, it muted all sound around and from the user, attuning the person's voice to another's chakra signature, while at the same time, it attuned the user's ears to the other person's voice, amplifying their sensitivity so the other voice could be heard even over great distance. It was an excellent spying technique and an horrible torture technique as well. In-chan, I am disappointed in your team's performance, the cool voice of her leader echoed throughout her ears. I was expecting the Uzumaki team to be far more dirty than they were. It looked almost as if you didn't even try. My apologies, Orochimaru-sama, she whispered, we did confront them, but decided it was best to not go too far. I felt that, as the other one. I don't care about the other one. The voice roared, causing the girl to cringe in pain. Her hands instinctively covered her ears in a vain attempt to block the voice. The point is that you were to gauge their abilities, yet I received no report. Why did you not report on the group skills? My lord, we didn't really see much of their skills, she whispered back, trying to keep the whimper of pain from entering her voice. We only really learned of the sword wielder's blade, not his dances or anything else. The Yuzuki girl. The Yuzuki do not concern me, Kin. The snake-san hissed, I know all about them, and they are not worth my attention, not even my old teammate Jiraiya. I have progressed further than anyone can realize. Orochimaru-sama, I can beat them. She whispered, I admit, I was up-repped for that Suna Kunoichi, but the Uzumaki heir I can match. I could have beat that Suna girl as well, if I hadn't miscalculated the force of her futon. Excuses, Kin, he replied, a low hiss through the jutsu causing her to shiver in fear. Zaku, Dosu, Yoroi, and Musumi have served their purposes. You might yet be useful. My lord. She asked, what would you have? Prove your worth to me, Kin, he muttered, a dark tone to his voice, find the one called Naruto and eliminate him. Why my lord? Is he truly? She started to ask, only to cry out as a loud roar filled her ears, her head pounding from the intense agony. Because I order it, you foolish girl. He hissed, complete this assignment and you will be rewarded greatly. I might even give you personal training enough to join Taiya-chan and Karen-chan as members of my elite. Fail, however, and I'll teach you such exquisite ways of pain that you will beg for death. The dark-haired girl shivered in fear at the thought. Orochimaru required all his ninja to watch interrogation. She had been sick for days after her turn had come. The man was a sick, twisted, and sadistic genius, and he was creative at causing pain. I will obey, Orochimaru-sama, she whispered. Do not fail, Kin-chan, the final whisper came, taunting her with its mocking sense of affection. She broke the jutsu just as a nurse walked into the room. You're free to go, Tsuchi-san, she muttered, your back is going to be tender for another day or so, but otherwise you're in perfect health. Thank you, the dark-haired girl replied, shrugging off the hospital gown and reaching for her camouflage cargo pants, slipping them over her lithe legs and cinching the belt around her waist. She adjusted her black panties slightly from the outside of her pants before reaching for her bandage roll and beginning the process of binding her chest. She wasn't as stacked as Karen or Taya, but she had slightly more than a handful, and she was quite content with it. In actuality she honestly thought her legs were her best feature, even if her choice of clothing tended to hide them from view. After her chest was bound, she donned her grey tank top and yellow scarf. A simple white ribbon kept her hair tied back, black shinobi-style sandals covered her feet, and her hit-eye wrapped around her head to complete the look. She spared a brief glance in the mirror of the bathroom she had. She'd consider herself beautiful if not for the redness in her eyes. Even if he's not like the rest of them, she thought, firming her resolve with a deep breath, he's still in Uzumaki. She walked out of the room. Now then, Hinata-chan, Shiori grinned at the young Kunoichi, I'm going to be very frank with you. It might seem like I'm insulting you, but what I have to say needs to be said. Oh no, I am prepared, Shiori-sama, the blue-haired girl replied, cursing herself for stuttering yet again. As far as the Jaiken goes you're pathetic at the style, the elder replied, you've got the grace and flexibility for it, there's no question. The problem isn't even your Byakugan, it's your attitude. You lack the cold fire we Hyuga pride ourselves on. Oh no, cold fire Shiroi-sama. The small girl asked, what is that? Our eyes let us see many things, Hinata, the elder replied, leaning on her cane, we can read our opponent's emotions by watching their physical reactions. We can read our opponent's thoughts by watching how their eyes shift. We can even direct an opponent's emotions somewhat by focusing our gaze at them. The intimidation factor of the Byakugan is matched only by the Sharingan. I still don't understand, Hinata replied, I know I've felt intimidated whenever father uses his Byakugan on me, but what does? I'm getting to that, young one, the elder replied, surely you've seen evidence at just how dispassionate certain members of the clan are, compared to others. At Hinata's nod, she continued, you probably didn't notice, however, how these members are the most exceptional students of Jaiken. Hinata gaped at that, then thought back to how Niji was whenever he was practicing his forms. She had always noted that he seemed distant when practicing, but now she realized that he was acting truly unemotional. I see you're beginning to grasp the concept, Shiori grinned as Hinata's eyes widened in understanding, Jaiken is a cold Taijutsu style. It's all about separating oneself from emotion and using that clarity to strike out at the opponent's weakness. Those who can achieve this clarity can perform any Jaiken technique, from the Kaiten to the Haki Rakuju Yansho. But, I can't because Hinata muttered, realizing the truth Shiori was trying to impart. You achieve the very opposite of that clarity, Hinata-chan, the white-haired woman replied, you sympathize with your opponent's emotions, and you understand them. Indeed, this can be a very powerful weapon in of itself, but for Jaiken it's more of a burden. Does that mean that I'll never achieve the Kaiten or any of the other techniques? She asked. Shiori sighed. The Kaiten is more about chakra control than the others, so I don't think it's out of your reach, she replied, but the Rakuju Yansho and the advanced forms. It's unlikely. At the girl's downcast look, she grinned. Cheer up, young one. There is something else I can teach you, something that if you can truly master it, might even allow you to surpass the Jaiken and the Uzumaki Ryu combined for sheer destructive force. Hinata gaped at the thought. Her mind instantly flowed back to her fight with Taro. She still had phantom pains from his blade technique. Like all Hyuga, you're a close-range fighter, Hinata-chan, Shiori went on, teaching you long and mid-range jutsu is only a small part of what you're going to learn. She motioned to a pile of rocks that sat slightly behind her. Ah no, what are the rocks for, Shiori-sama? The young heiress asked. These rocks will be the focusing point of your training, Hinata-chan, the white-haired elder explained, picking up one of the stones and tossing it to the girl. I want you to pulverize that stone. Hinata recalled the lessons on brick breaking and how it had been one lesson in Taijutsu that she had been surprisingly good at. Okay, she whispered, focusing her strength and smashing her fist against the stone, shattering it. That's very good for brick breaking, the elder yawned, but I said pulverize, not break. But the girl started. Stop that stuttering. Shiori snapped, causing the girl to clam up, one of the benefits of the training I'm going to put you through is definitely going to be the confidence you need to get over that. The elder picked up another stone, holding it in her right hand. Look at the pieces of your stone, Hinata. The girl did as she was told and looked at the chunks of rock that now lay scattered at her feet. What should I be seeing, Shiori-sama? She asked. It's not what you should be seeing, Hinata-chan, the old woman replied, it's what you should not be seeing. She pointed to one of the larger chunks of rock. When you pulverize something, there should be nothing of it left. When you leave something behind, you risk exposing not only yourself, but your comrades and others. A shinobi must be like the wind, it blows through a field, but you can never tell it was there. Shiori-sama, how can I pulverize a stone? The young girl asked, no matter how I strike it, it will only break into pieces. Ah, and therein lies the secret to this technique, Shiori grinned. I taught this technique to Tsunadeheim back when she was still a genin kami-sama, now that girl had talent. She picked up the concept right off the bat and she even managed to improve it with her incredible chakra control. I'm learning a technique that Swan-sama knows. Hinata asked, feeling herself grow a bit lightheaded at the concept. Tsunade's skills, both in taijutsu and in medical ninjutsu, were benchmarks for kunoichi of all nations. Learning it? I'm hoping you'll improve it, the elder chuckled at the small girl's gaping look. Now, you know about resistance, right? At the girl's nod, she continued. Everything has a natural resistance to everything else in the world. When you strike something, you lose a certain amount of force breaking that resistance. Even in Jaiken? The girl asked. Especially in Jaiken, Shiori replied, not only do we lose some of the physical force in our blows, but we lose some of the chakra force we inject when it encounters the opposing energy. I think I understand, Shiori-sama, Hinata replied, but if the resistance is natural, how can we pulverize anything that has it? By not losing any of the force, the old woman replied, suddenly striking the stone and turning it into powder. Hinata gasped. How? The key to this technique is speed, Hinata-chan, Shiori replied, it was developed by monks in ancient times and passed down through generations until it was given to our clan. What is it called, Shiori-sama? The girl asked, breathless at the idea. This is the technique that Tsunade Haim knows and even improved. It's the technique that you, I hope, will take ever further. It's called Futai no Kiwami. 2. Kin growled as she walked the streets. How can it be so hard to find someone wearing neon orange? She mentally screamed. She'd been out hunting for the strange blonde for a few hours now, desperately seeking to fulfill Orochimaru's order before his next contact. She had a feeling she wouldn't survive it. Her head still ached from the roaring voice of her leader over the jutsu. She winced as she realized that Dosu, Zaku, and Yoroi were likely getting the same treatment. Miss Yumi, at least, had it easy being dead. She moved towards one of the nearby training grounds, one that had a large lake and river running through it. She needed to vent some steam, and a few Doten jutsu on some trees would be just the ticket. She walked through the brush and froze as she heard a voice. Baju Fuin Kai. A loud male voice cried out, deep enough to identify itself as a full-grown adult. Erg. A younger voice came, the pain in the voice causing the dark-haired Kunoichi to wince. A seal release? She thought, on a person. That cannot have been fun. There now, that should make things a little easier, the older voice started up again. Orochimaru always was sloppy with Fuin jutsu. You wouldn't think it, given his handwriting was even better than Nidaime-sama's, and that guy was a calligraphy master. That hurt, Iro-senin. The younger voice cried out, and Kin felt her breath hitch. It's him. She realized, instinctively reaching for her senbon and bells. She inched forward, peeking through the brush until she could see the talking duo. There was a tall, oddly dressed man with a huge mane of white, spiky hair standing by the river's edge, a large scroll slung across his back. His outfit was primarily gray, with a red vest and belt and tan wooden Jetta sandals adorning his feet. The other one was far shorter and was currently only wearing his hit-I-8 and pair of blue swim trunks with orange frogs. His blonde hair was wet and water was running down his scowling face over the strange whisker marks he had. His blue eyes glinted in the afternoon light. These kinda cute, the girl thought. Then she saw a strange black mark on his stomach. It looked like a seal, with a strange spiral mark in the center, surrounded by symbols stretching out along the plane of his skin. It was very complex, and she wondered if even Orochimaru would know what it was. You could be able to mold your chakra much more easily now, the older man was saying, try the water walking exercise again. This had better work, Iro-senin, the blonde growled, before walking out on the water. Kin frowned as he did it easily. That's a pretty high-level exercise, she noted, he's not going to be an easy opponent. Hey. It works. Awesome. Or he might just be too stupid to be an opponent, she thought again, sweat dropping as the boy began dancing and leaping about the river's surface. Naruto, that's enough for now. The older man called, we have a lot of work to do and only a month to get it all done. Okay. The boy replied, leaping back to shore. Now, we're going to outline your training, the old man said, it's going to be twofold, but first, let's deal with our guest. The kunai came hurling towards her and she leapt out of the brush to avoid it, landing a few yards from the scowling duo. Hey. Naruto shouted, you're that girl from the prelims. The one with the sister who was raped and mutilated by your clan. Kin growled, my elder sister, the only one who protected me and Himitsu Tsuchi-ck. During the war with Iwa, am I right? The older man asked, I think I know the group of idiots you're talking about. So it's true? Naruto asked. Kin frowned as she noticed him bow his head like he was ashamed. The older man sighed. Unfortunately, it probably is, he muttered, war is a terrible thing, Naruto. People get hurt and innocents always get caught in the crossfire. Iwa ninjas raped and tortured our ninjas, and while Sarutobi-sensei, Yondaime-sama, and others tried to prevent it, Iwa women were raped and tortured as well. That's horrible, the boy muttered. The old man nodded. You likely have to torture people sometimes too, kid, he went on, as a ninja, information is key to survival. If an enemy has information you need, sometimes you'll have to do things you'll hate to get the info out. Even Yondaime-sama had to torture people sometimes. I can tell ya, he died a little bit each time he was forced to do so, especially when it was a woman. Yondaime believed women should be revered, not harmed. Kin growled. I hate your Yondaime. She spat, he took my father from me, but I can understand why he did, but the Uzumaki clan will pay for CK's life. Naruto frowned. Don't associate me with them. He snapped back, I was abandoned by them when I was 4 years old. I want nothing to do with them. You use their style, don't you? She asked, that Iggy style is what took her life. I swore I'd find a way to crush it, and I'll start with you. I don't even know it really. The blonde shouted back, I know some theory to it, but anything I create is my own. It doesn't belong to the Uzumaki. I'm nothing like them. Prove it. Kin growled, raising her senbon to her face, fight me. Prove to me you're really different. You're on. Naruto replied, flipping back to his pile of clothing, grabbing his weapons pouches and strapping them to his thighs. He settled down into a loose Ige-ready stance. The pair stood silent for a few moments, then rushed forward. The battle began. When she thought hard about it, Sakura realized that Kakashi was doing her a favor by getting her this advanced training. She'd taken the time to read up about the Takebetsu Jonin Anko, and she had to admit she was impressed with the mission record. After all, how many Jonins did she know who had completed over 40 A-rank missions? Especially at the age of 24. The other girl, Yugao, was no less impressive in that department. Much of her file was classified due to Anbu regulations, she was sure, but 27 ranks was still impressive for a 20-year-old. Yes, when she thought about it, she was grateful to her sensei for getting her these trainers. Of course, it was hard to think about it while trying to dodge a hail of kunai from the trenchcoat and fishnet-clad crazy woman. Pay attention. Anko snapped as she unleashed another barrage of deadly metal from the sleeves of her coat. Sakura backflipped away from the blades, trying, and failing more often than not, to deflect some with the kunai held in her right hand. A few more cuts appeared on her pale skin as the blades moved across her form. Don't try to block so many, Sakura-san, the purple-haired Anbu called out, a ninja does what is needed to win the battle, not what is needed to make a good show. I'm trying senpai, the pink-dressed girl panted, her hair now in a tight ponytail bouncing with each breath. Hey, the girl's got some serious physical issues, Anko chuckled, pulling a dango skewer from her pouch and munching on the sweet dumplings. I keep telling Iruka he needs to step up that physical training course. I believe he's being overruled on that by Suzume-san, Yugao chuckled, the woman would put all Kunoichi hopefuls through courtesan training above physical conditioning if she could get away with it. Sakura blushed at the thought of courtesan training. I wonder if Sasuke-kun let your mind out of the gutter, Pinky, Anko snapped, shaking the girl from her reverie. Kakashi sent you here to get fit and learn, not to drool over the 2 future stud muffins on your team. Boss Sakura gaped, I do not see Naruto as a stud muffin. Too bad, the kid's got real potential, the elder woman replied, I kinda like those blue eyes of his, much more expressive than the rest of his clan. He would not like you referring to it as his clan, Anko-senpai, Yugao replied, I don't particularly care to be associated with them either. Yeah, I get all that, Yugao, the brown-eyed woman responded, still, it is still technically his clan. He may have been left behind, but he hasn't been taken off the register yet, has he? Yugao frowned. No, he hasn't, she admitted, though I soon will be. Anko grinned. So, Cough Boy finally popped the Q, huh? Sakura glanced at the purple-haired woman, who was now blushing slightly. Cough Boy, you mean that proctor from the prelims, Hate, wasn't it? Yugao smiled. Yes, Hate-kun and I have been together for almost 4 years now, she replied, we're planning to marry on October 9th, the day before Naruto-kun's birthday. Sakura smiled, that's wonderful. Yeah, I'll bring the Seiken male strippers to the party, Anko interrupted, tossing her dango skewer at the young Kunoichi and forcing her to start dodging again. Now, where were we? And so the training began again. Sasuke stared out over the village from the cliff he was on, waiting for Kakashi to arrive. He absent-mindedly rubbed his shoulder where Orochimaru had branded him with the curse seal. The power I felt with this thing, I know it's wrong, but it felt so strong, he thought, his mind struggling with the concept of denying power that could put him on Itachi's level. He felt the familiar ache in his heart as he recalled the 3 members of the now deceased Uchiha clan that he had loved the most. The gentle, soothing sounds of his mother's humming while she made the bentos for his and Itachi's lunches, the boisterous laughter of his uncle Kitsaya as he hammered away the nicks from various kunai in his forge, his aunt's warm smile as she complimented him on his report card from the academy. Unbidden, the memory of his father praising him for mastering the Gakakyu no Jutsu came to mind. It was the happiest memory he had of the otherwise stern and imposing man. I have to beat him, he thought, I won't fall into his trap, Orochimaru's. I will get stronger and I'll make him pay. His eyes shifted to the side as Kakashi appeared, leaping up from the sheer edge of the cliff. "You're late, Kakashi-sensei," he muttered, far more quietly than his teammates would have, he was sure. "Well, I had a toothache and needed to visit the dentist," Kakashi replied. Sasuke was shocked at what seemed like an almost reasonable excuse for once. "It took the doctor a while to find a way to work through my mask." Sasuke groaned. "I knew it was too good to be true." Kakashi stood straighter after that. "Now, we've got a lot of work to do and very little time to do it," he said. "Much of this training is going to be purely physical, Sasuke. I have to get your speed as close to my own as I possibly can in order for you to be able to use the jutsu I'm going to teach you, so from this point on, if you need to get somewhere, you're on." "What about training my Sharingan?" Sasuke asked. "Should I keep it active during the training?" "No," the silver-top Jonin replied. "In fact, unless I specifically tell you to, do not activate your Sharingan. If you rely on it too much, you'll never be able to match Itachi." "What? But how can I hope to surpass his eyes if I don't train my own?" the Uchiha asked, confused by this turn of events. "Itachi's eyes are powerful, that's true," Kakashi replied. "I know how strong he was back then, he was a subordinate of mine after all." He waved his hand when Sasuke started to speak. "Anbu Sasuke, and I can't tell you more than that yet. After the exams, if you're promoted, I might be able to tell you." Sasuke frowned, but nodded. "But my eyes. Did you know that unless it was during a battle, Itachi never used his Sharingan to learn a jutsu?" Kakashi asked, interrupting his student yet again. At his dumbfounded look, Kakashi elaborated. "Tell me, have you ever seen a photocopied piece of paper?" "Yeah," Sasuke replied, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. "The Sharingan's ability to copy jutsus works along a similar principle," the masked man replied. "Now, tell me, what's a photocopy usually look like when compared to the original?" "It's usually just black and white," he replied. "Exactly," Kakashi said, his visible eye turning into an upside-down U, signifying his smile. "Some of the details are lost, right? The color, the feel of the document is diminished. So, if you apply that concept to copying jutsu with the Sharingan, the effectiveness is lost?" the boy asked. "You got it," Kakashi replied. "I may have copied 1,000 jutsu with my own Sharingan, but I practice those jutsu constantly. I learn about them, understand them, and see how they can be applied in different situations." Itachi was the same way. "So, by taking the time to learn it the hard way," Sasuke started, "you can not only use it more effectively, but you can also conceivably increase its power," Kakashi continued. "That's why, when I teach you my technique, I want you to learn it without the Sharingan." "Then let's get started," Sasuke replied, setting down into a ready stance of his family's Taijutsu style. "I don't want to waste any time." "Good," Kakashi